evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 128 of the Retrospectives podcast, Baldur's Gate. My name is Patrick Arthur, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, James Turlings. James, we are finally doing Baldur's Gate. It's a big, chunky, messy Western RPG. We've done some JRPGs in the past, but we've tended to steer clear of these more substantial, long games just because it's difficult for us to play them in such a short time. Tell me a little bit about what you know about Baldur's Gate. Was this a game you were keen to try? Is this a game that you're interested in, or had you never really heard of it before?
Well, of course I'd heard about it, and of course I'd played some of, the games on this engine before, but I'd never really given them a real crack, honestly. And I think it was about time we did a Western RPG on the show. So it's kind of going to be interesting to talk about. In the last couple of years, I've really gotten into tabletops, so I think I've got a fair bit to say on this subject now, and I'm glad we've finally gotten around to giving it a crack.
So what modern RPGs have you played that are similar to this? Because Baldur's Gate was enormously influential in the Western RPG space, even more than something like Fallout. And it spawned, I guess, an entire genre basically of clones, whether they're real time with pause like Baldur's Gate is, or true turn based. What comparison points are you going to be bringing to the show today?
Yeah, so I think when I was younger, I didn't really play a lot of these style RPGs. But in more recent years, there's been a lot of big releases like the Pathfinder games from Owlcat, Baldur's Gate 3, of course, which I played through to completion with a friend group. I think there was one more, I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, a lot more of this experience has been in the last 5 years than, say, in my childhood. Yourself?
So I did play these games a little bit when I was younger, back when they came on 6 CDs and you had to keep changing CDs as you gathered
Mm.
your party. But I never got very far. I think the furthest I got was completing the Nashkel Mines, which is the initial dungeon that you go into,
Mm.
really, and never really played beyond that. So my party would have capped out at level 3 or something, and I had no idea what I was doing whatsoever. As for modern times, I'm a little less experienced than you, James. I did play Baldur's Gate 3 and the Divinity games, but I never really got into the Pathfinder games or the Warhammer RPG. And I've got a little bit of tabletop experience, but it's infrequent and they tended to be much lower party adventures. I know that you've been playing a lot more tabletop recently.
Yeah, we've got one or two campaigns, three going at the moment. We're currently the longest ongoing one is Pathfinder First Edition: Curse of the Crimson Throne, which is an adventure path that goes up to level 17, and we're at level 11 at the moment. So we've been doing that for about 2-ish years now. So that's been super fun. And we've also got one going in second edition more recently, which is a system that's a lot more like video gamey, I guess, than something like first edition, which is, very obviously just D&D 3.75 effectively. Prior to that, when I was younger, maybe just out of high school, we used to do a lot of we actually did some AD&D, like Baldur's Gate users, and we did a lot of 5th edition D&D. But they were very loose kind of games, around a table with some beers. Not very rules heavy, whereas my recent experience, everyone's a lot more, trying to keep things coherent rather than just silly fun.
So the reason I bring all this up is that I really want to dive deep in this episode about what it is that makes Baldur's Gate Baldur's Gate. What is it that makes it different from modern takes on the RPG genre? So what James and I do each and every episode is that we play retro video games that are at least 15 years old, which is becoming alarmingly, newer and newer as time passes, of course. And we have a discussion on whether they have truly stood the test of time. What we do is we review these games from a modern perspective as if they had been just released today. In a lot of ways, this is an unfair standard of criticism because we're not taking into account the developments that video games have made over the years. But we found that in just as many instances as games are terrible because they are outdated and unenjoyable, we've also discovered that a lot of these old games do things uniquely or differently to modern games. In a lot of instances, they do them sometimes even better. So, what we want to explore on this episode when discussing and reviewing Baldur's Gate is what, how it does things differently, the degree to which those things are different, and whether they are for better or for worse, or if they're simply producing a unique experience that you can't get anywhere else. I'm going to give you a little bit of information on Baldur's Gate. We don't do a big dive into the history of these games normally because we're more interested in the substance of the game, but it's good to get some baseline understanding of what these games are like. So, for those who are unaware of Baldur's Gate, it is a real time with pause isometric party RPG first released in 1998 by Bioware. And if you don't understand what all those words mean, worry not, we will be diving into them more later. You take control of Gorion's ward, so your character has a background, but you get to create your character choosing their race, sex, class, etc. But they do occupy a role as a ward, an orphan that has been adopted by a person called Gorion. And you're suddenly being targeted by assassins. By exploring the lands, you slowly unravel a mystery surrounding both the Iron Throne, which is where the seat of power in Baldur's Gate itself, the city, lies, and your identity. We played Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition, which was first released in 2012 and which has received many, many, many updates over the years. Most people agree that the Enhanced Edition is the way to play Baldur's Gate 1 today. It is a huge overhaul of the game. It changes enemies, it changes mechanics, it fixes a lot of bugs, and it back updates. I don't know if that's the right word, James, but it kind of like backdates Baldur's Gate 1 to the Baldur's Gate 2 engine. Kind of similar with what happened with the remasters of Homeworld, how they took a lot of the Homeworld 2 updated mechanics and put them into Homeworld 1, which has some unintended side consequences, but generally just gives you more options, more classes. The big thing it adds are some new companions. So the games are mostly the same, just with like millions of little tweaks, but the new content is mainly focused around the new companions who are all fully voice acted with their dialogue, whereas the older games didn't have as much. Once again, after reading, the enhanced edition is the general consensus of how to play. A lot of people play this game heavily modded, and they mod the enhanced edition. There is a small vocal group that thinks that the original is still worth playing, but majority of people are like, "Yep, if you're playing Baldur's Gate 1 in today's time, you should play the enhanced edition." Even though there are some wrinkles, it ultimately does more good than harm and improves the experience. So
Yeah, normally when there's these kinds of updates, that vocal minority you're talking about is a lot bigger. I think it's very small in this case. Like pretty much everyone agrees that EE is the way to go. And honestly, more importantly than the companions, it adds a bunch of inventory management quality of life features that I think, like to me, the game's almost like half as playable without them. So very, very good, I think. And I think the characters they added generally fit in with the rest of them,
yeah,
other than
which
being
is
maybe a bit more talky.
it is quite funny because one of the things that's interesting is I think that people have a warped idea of the tone of this game. They
Oh,
have in
yeah.
their head that this is a very serious, down to earth game. And while the main plot is pretty serious and down to earth, there is no doubt in my mind that this is a goofy fucking game. It is a very
Mm.
goofy, silly game in a lot of spots. I would say equally as goofy as Fallout 2, honestly. Just because I don't know the personality of the writers, they were silly and they wanted to fit all that stuff in the edges. So, like you,
It's
I didn't find the writing of the new content that out of whack with the original.
I mean, a lot of the new characters weren't that silly. Like there was a couple of them that were about as silly as the other characters, and then there was like that orc guy who's just super serious. I don't
Mm.
know. It seems pretty tonally, in line with the rest of it, even if by different writers.
Yeah, but this is also say that if you were going to play this game, the enhanced edition is the way to play it. And unless you're a diehard purist, then you should just play it. It changes things like, for example, I know that in the original edition there was no cap on the amount of summons you could have, so you could spam, literally 100 summonable monsters onto the screen. This is the kind of thing that the enhanced edition has changed. A lot of it is bringing it in line with the mechanics of Baldur's Gate 2 exploits that were discovered in the original game that they fixed in the second game. So lots of tweaks around the edges, but the core of the game is still the same as it was back in 1990. So, James, we don't like to screw around too much on this show. So let's start talking about Baldur's Gate. I think the way I want to do this is Baldur's Gate is a very complex game. But the complexity doesn't come at you all at once. It kind of gradually escalates. So what I want to do is I want to talk about our journeys through Baldur's Gate, and we'll use that as a framework to kick off some more in-depth discussions over how the game actually works. Because I feel like that would just be an organic way for us to dive into the weeds rather than break this down all into its tiny component parts, because we'd be here for days just trying to get in. So let's start with character creation and, by extension, a little bit of character development as you level up. What did you think of the character creation options in this game? Do you think that it is, I mean, it's a bit simpler than the Pathfinder games, for example, but it seemed to me that there were a lot of options available in terms of characters that I could select and create.
Yeah, there's a reasonable variety here. Honestly, I felt less enamored by character creation here than in like Fallout 1 and 2, which I felt like had a lot more diversity in terms of, I guess, my agency as a player picking something.
More granularity, right? With the skill system,
Yeah, like here you kind of have a bunch of class race combinations which are hard locked. You can't pick every class with every race, and you can't pick every multi-class with every race either. So, for example, I made a thief cleric multi-class, and you have to pick either half orc or gnome for your character. I went with gnome. And there is a lot of actually hidden complexity with this in AD&D that I actually looked up a bit before I committed to something. So there are some pretty non-obvious things with the way your stats work in this game. For example, strength, not like, because this is a fairly standard D20 stat allocation system, right? Like you have a base of 10 strength, dexterity, constitution, wisdom, intelligence, and you have a bit of there's no point buy, right? So you have to roll for stats in this game, now that I think about it. So I guess my character creation was mostly sitting there clicking reroll until I got something that was kind of reasonable.
I mean, would you say that the way I view it is that the actual character creation, when you're sitting down to make your character, isn't that interesting. You don't have a lot of choices.
No.
But those decisions are made off screen, and I think that this is something that's going to be a running theme through this game. Baldur's Gate 1, I spent a lot of time engaging with Baldur's Gate 1, reading about it as much as I did actually playing it. I think this is a game that if you go in completely blind, you're almost doing yourself a disservice. And I did a lot of engaging with the, I guess, people talking about different spells and different races and everything as much as I did playing it. Do you think it's valid to say that the process of researching what kind of character combination you wanted is part of the character creation process?
I absolutely think so. Like, you could go in blind, but I think there are some, little things that might trip you up, like the way your strength score works. Like, once you hit 18 strength, you then have a second, like, percentile that rolls up to 75, I think. So you could have a bad
up
18.
to 0, actually. See, I know this from the time I spent rolling it as a kid. So 1800 is a perfect roll.
It's like, yeah, so you can have a bad 18 or a good 18. And then, like, small races get better saves depending on their constitution, so that's an important stat, but it doesn't exactly tell you that in character creation. stuff like that. In general, RPGs of this complexity do require like a baseline knowledge that you should look into. Like the manual should give you a pretty good idea, but yeah, there's like a couple of subclasses I know that are kind of bad. I think it's like Wizard Slayer and Monk are pretty bad.
Hmm.
So like I at minimum would recommend looking up which are the like unplayable ones and avoiding those. But generally, I was having a lot of fun reading about this stuff. I always kind of like character creation and learning about systems like this. So, you know, in terms of the actual game's presentation of it, it's not great. I wish there was point buy and not rolling, but you know, it's systems inherently fun to learn about, I
The,
guess.
the rolling is just stupid because when you start, you just roll your stats like you would if you were rolling a character on the tabletop, but there's no limit to the number of rerolls you can do. So
Nobody I know does rolled stats anymore, like even in tabletop. It's just
interesting. We always did rolled stats, and then
yeah, we used to as well.
we
And
just had it was like some kind of like modifier to it. It wasn't truly random. Like it was you roll X dice, and then you can pick some of them to reduce the variance a bit. But
I think it's very context dependent. Like if you're playing some one shot campaigns where you expect to play like 4 sessions with a character that's kind of throwaway, yeah, absolutely rolling for stats is fun. If you're committing to like a 2 year adventure or something, you really don't want to spend that whole time being like,
being
God, my
gimped.
stats suck. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. To some degree, I do think the stats don't matter that much, though. And this is the second thing I wanted to get into because while you do roll a character and that is your character, Baldur's Gate is a party-based RPG. You play
Yep.
as 6 characters, and while I was playing this game, I very much felt like I had a party of 6 characters and I was playing all of them. So even if you don't understand things like smaller characters get saves or I have a bad strength score, it doesn't really actually matter that
Yeah.
much for the
I
vanilla
agree.
experience, right? So uh, I, I think this is true of a lot of the complexity in this game. There's a lot of complexity in this game where shit is happening in the background that you're unaware of. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't actually affect your decision making. And even if you were aware of it, you probably wouldn't have done things differently. It's just that there's stuff under the hood that doesn't make sense. I don't think that's true of everything, but here at least, yes, there's shit happening that you don't get. But to me, that actually doesn't matter too much as long as you understand the basics here, which I think are reasonably well.
So character creation finishes, and then your character wakes up in Candlekeep with your father Gorion or adoptive father Gorion saying that you have to get ready to leave, basically. So Candlekeep is like a big fortress that's also a huge library, and basically the people there guard over the archive, protecting it, accepting. I believe to get entrance to the archive, the law thing is you have to donate a book that's not in the library
A
to the
rare book,
library.
a book of
Yeah,
exceptional value, I think.
which I think is quite interesting. So it's like a cool setup.
And
So
it's a big tutorial zone essentially.
yeah, it's like a big circle, and you kind of go around it clockwise or counterclockwise, doing little quests like, "Oh, hey friend, I lost my thingy. Can you go find it?" That kind of
Go
thing.
kill the rats, etc.
Go kill the rats in the cellar. Yeah, that kind of stuff. Where you only have one, 2 characters. Is it? Do you get Imoen before you leave?
I
Like
didn't have
as you
Imoen in my
leave?
party, but I thought you could get her in your party in this first bit. But I might not have remembered correctly. But at least for me, it was just me.
Yeah, so it's mostly just you at the beginning. So at this point, it's kind of like learning how to control your character, how to cast spells, how to like dig into the menu and set up the chat log to work the way you need it to, because I don't think the default settings are
Oh
very good.
yeah, we should talk about that. So basically, by default, so the thing that you pointed out to me is that the characters just add in extra attacks when you attack someone, whereas there's a setting that changes it so they only attack when they actually have an attack,
Yeah, there's like these extra attacks they do for show, but you
which
can
is
disable
terrible.
that so you can actually see when things are doing real attacks. and then you can, make it show the rolls of the dice on the log, which I don't think it does by
No.
default. Yeah, I would highly recommend going into the logs during this section and customizing them. There's also a bunch of settings that impact the real time with pause behavior. For example, there's one that makes it auto pause when combat starts, auto pause when enemy spellcaster starts casting a spell, auto pause when someone takes damage, stuff like that. I'd recommend making it about as granular as you need. I don't really jive with the defaults. I would make it more aggressive than not.
And honestly, the other thing which for me was a big thing is that your companions have AI by default, and you should just turn that shit off immediately. Yeah,
Yeah.
you set all of their basic attack to basic attack, and that gives you full control over them, and they don't start trying to do things without you. This is not the kind of game where AI subroutines should be used at all. I know that some games like Dragon Age Origins, I think it's FF12, utilize these
Program it.
where you can program and it works quite well. This game, you should never play like this. It's just the combat doesn't flow in that manner. You have to be a lot more reactive and creative, I guess, in how you respond to situations. You can't be just auto responding. Let's talk a little bit about real time with pause, because this was one of my concerns going into this game. Real time with pause, I think for the uninitiated, is very, very messy and clunky. Like, it doesn't seem good. It doesn't even initially feel good. But the more I played this game, the more I fell in love with real time with pause. And now I actually think it is in a lot of ways superior to purely turn-based system. Do you feel any way similar, James? Give me your take on real time with.
It sounds like my opinion of real time with pause is the inverse of yours, in that to the begin with, I thought it was great, and as the game went on, I hated it more and more and just wished it was turn based.
Yeah, let's. I guess we should explain what real time with pause is. I mean, it's in the name, but it's worth considering. So Baldur's Gate works on a turn-based system. There is a round-based system in play. If you have a fighter with one attack a round, that means every 6 seconds they attack once. This isn't real time in the sense that it's an action game where if you click lots, your character attacks faster. Everything is still tied to rounds. The difference is that all of these things will flow in real time unless you press the pause button. So you're not taking a one-turn action. There's a lot of variability in the speed of attacks and spell casting that kind of break this strict every one round is 6 seconds. So you might have something that takes 5 seconds or 3 seconds or 4 seconds. You might have an attacker that has 1.75 attacks a round, which basically makes them attack faster. And this all will just flow naturally at the same time. However, you can pause at will. You have the ability to pause whenever you like. And for me, the revelation, James, is that it's less real time with pause and it's more pause with real time. You spam pause nonstop in this game, but you get to choose when you pause. You have complete and utter control over the pacing of the combat because you can control when you pause. There's no limit on when you can pause. Does that sound like a fair description? Or am I missing anything?
No, that sounds about right. You can automate it somewhat to pause when you need it to.
Which I didn't do, actually.
Yeah, things happen in those 6-second intervals. So, like, oftentimes, if you want to micromanage effectively, you'll have a character attack and then move around for a few seconds and then attack again. There's a lot of pause, issue 6 commands, unpause for like 2 seconds, maybe pause again, issue 6 commands.
Yeah, because like a character's spell will finish faster than this character casting the other spell. So as soon as that spell's cast, you want to pause and re-queue up the next command. And then as they're waiting for their turn to cast the spell, you're like, oh shit, actually I need them to do this. So you re-pause, change the spell they're casting so that when it comes to their turn again, they're ready to do it.
Yeah, pause, change ammo type, drink potion, fiddle with inventory, unpause kind of.
Yeah, that's a big thing as well, because you can kind of move potions and scrolls and wands and items at will while you're paused. There's no penalty to doing so. So James, tell me what you didn't like about this. Tell me why you prefer strict turn-based, or tell me the upsides and downsides of the system, because I think it is more complex than better or worse.
So early on into the game, when you don't have too many options, and most of the game is more about positioning, kiting, and just generally movement, I think it worked really well. Where it got really tedious for me is when people started getting lots of spells. And so the amount of time that I was pausing, like the amount of times I was pressing the space bar, just went up through the roof. And I like, it may as well be turn based at that point in time, right? Like, it's just tedious to me. I also find it kind of like twitchy if you're not using like, things get faster in the late game. So if you don't use those settings that are like pause on spell being cast, you will very often miss a crucial timing to cast something like silence to interrupt a fireball, and you'll just die. Whereas if it was turn-based, like, the option of doing that is not. There were a lot of reloads I did because I was too slow on the button.
Yeah, or
Basically.
they'll use a wand of horror and they will fear four of your party members at once, and you're
Yeah.
like, what? What? Just immediately off the bat, and all of a sudden you're in huge trouble.
Yeah, or like one thing that shit me off consistently was my archer would use their last piece of ammo in their current stack, and it doesn't automatically swap to the next stack of arrow. Instead, they automatically swap to their melee weapon and start running forward to their death. That happened to me a couple of times. Stuff like that, like characters moving in unexpected ways because you don't have full control all the time. Yeah, it just felt like it was totally fun and enjoyable in the first half of the game. And then once the complexity ramps up to, this huge scale, it gets pretty overwhelming and unmanageable for me. And the amount of tactics required in the late game is a lot, right? So I really just would prefer that fine-grained control that being pure turn-based would have given me.
Do you think that the upside of being able to speed through low-level
Trash
encounters
mobs?
is worth it, though? Because one of the things about Baldur's Gate 3 that comes to mind, which is obviously going to be a common comparison with this, is that there's a lot of these encounters take a long time, and after you have functionally won the encounter, so you're up, say, 6v3 against, three mediocre strength enemies, and you have your full party of four or whatever, it kind of feels like you're wasting time just mopping them up. Like, you're doing heals and you're casting spells and everything, but the result is inevitable. Baldur's Gate 1 lets you just speed through those encounters in seconds because you don't need to slow down the game. You can just basically right click to attack them. And then as the game gets more complex, yes, you pause more and more and more. But what I like about this system is that it's putting the control in the hands of the player, basically. When the fight is effectively won, you get to speed through it. You're not subject to a long, boring, drawn-out, foregone conclusion encounter, which is something that we've encountered in a lot of games like this. Like, even, say, Civilization. You can reach a point where you functionally won, but you need to still do all the mopping up.
Yeah, I agree with this. Actually, one of the things I like about our cat's game Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is that you can at any time swap between turn-based and real-time, even mid-combat. So you can do most of the fight in turn-based. And
I
then
know
once
Pillars
it's like,
2 has this as a feature as well, where it was real-time in the first game and they introduced the turn-based feature.
And then you just, for trash encounters or like at the end of encounters, you just swap it into real time and just watch things attack.
But how does that work with the different spell casting times, though? Because in Baldur's Gate 1, spells have different times and they, will range from 0 to 9 seconds, maybe lower for the lower level spell. But
yeah, normally in Pathfinder, standard action cast time is standard or like full round, so never more than one.
It doesn't have that granularity, right?
Yeah, because in those games, in your turn, you can move and do something.
Mm.
So you either have a spell that lets you move and spell, or you have to spend your move and your action to cast the spell.
Yeah, and it doesn't have like the 1.5 attacks per round thing or any of that.
Yeah, no, you get extra attacks in your round, but like, yeah, it's not like that. It's not time based, I guess. It's kind of abusable. There's this thing I noticed you can do is if you're kiting things in real time and they're about to catch up to you, you swap to turn based, and then you move your character in their turn, and then you instantly swap back to real time and start moving again. It's like you gain distance. It's so stupid.
That's funny.
But yeah, like I agree that there is value in what you said. I guess to me, like I'm okay with those fights being a bit tedious to get the high highs from the tactics bits.
So basically, what you're saying is the bespoke encounters where, say, you're fighting against two mages, a fighter, and a archer. You'd rather have a more controlled, balanced kind of
Yeah,
encounter than the kind of chaotic and somewhat random way that Baldur's Gate, this real time with pause kind of gives you. Because I think that there's something fundamentally like messy and scrappy about how a lot of these fights unwind. And I'm sure that when you're a master of the game, you can do a lot to exert more control over these fights. But for me, at least, they always felt a little scrappy in how they unfolded, which is actually something I liked. I felt like it gave it this more unique character than these modern games where I guess I didn't have 100% control over how these fights unfolded and what was happening.
mm,
But I see where you're coming from. It's definitely not it's not as precise as the modern takes on.
yeah, yeah. I found a lot of times, like when I would get to a tough encounter, oftentimes I would just reuse the same strategy 3 times, and eventually it would work. Just because,
Mm.
like, maybe my execution wasn't good enough, or dice rolls didn't go in my favor. It all leads up to like a game whose combat didn't necessarily always feel tactically rewarding to me. It felt like one that was very polarized between either fights are I box select my dudes and right click on everything and they die without me doing anything, or I come up with some cheese strategy to work around the real time limitation. Like there's enemies in a corridor, so I run I run my mage in the corridor, lightning bolt, and then run out and watch it bounce around the room rather than, engaging in the one like the party v party battle in this more nuanced and tactical way.
I think the thing about this game, and this is kind of like a broader point, is that I think you are to some degree forced to cheese it on some level, no matter what, unless you are an expert at this game and an Iron Manning your way through it. But even then, you're probably still employing and cheese strategies because at the most baseline level, quick saving and reloading is a kind of cheese. Like you're
Hmm.
not going through this game not quick saving and reloading your first try. I'm sorry, you're just not because of the fundamental vulnerability of your characters.
Especially early level, right? Like if we
Yeah.
go back to talking about the start of the game, like you basically just have like if you have a spellcaster, you have like one spell slot, and then you have some really, attacks that will hit like one
And you'll
in
die in one hit.
8 times, and you'll die in 1 or 2 hits.
Die
Yeah.
in one hit. Yeah. I had that happen to me a lot. And so for me, because of this, because the game is fundamentally unfair. A lot of what people call cheese for me are just the strategies for engaging with the game. And you get to decide exactly how much you want to do and what strategies you want to use. Like, I think for some people, using potions and wands is probably considered cheesy. I'm sure for some people, kiting is considered cheesy. And, quick saving and reloading and using the same strategy 3 times until you get the rolls you want is cheesy as well. But I think you need to kind of like get rid of the preconceptions you have towards that stuff and just view it all as different tools. that you can use to get through encounters, and you can use whichever ones you want in whichever combinations you want, and that's okay.
There's this thing, the thing it makes me think of is when I was younger and Dark Souls had first come out, and there was a boss I couldn't beat. I think it was like the Titanite demon, and what I did was I used arrows and I got it stuck on a rock and I shot it 1,000 times, which was super cheesy, right? I feel like that kind of strategy is sort of the norm in this game once it gets difficult enough, and your party just can't deal with some threats. You start having to resort to these like high-level cheesy tactics. I used that a lot throughout my playthrough, that kind of thing.
Interesting. Let's hold this thought, and we'll get back into it more as we get into those high-level encounters, James, because I think it's worth discussing the different ways we tackled some of the higher-level stuff. But let's put a pin in for now, if that's all.
Yeah.
Okay, so we went on a bit of a tangent. This is going to happen a bit, so bear with us. So Candlekeep. So you're wandering around, you're learning the basics of how to control the game. And you will soon leave Candlekeep and some stuff happens. I want to keep the story details vague, except to say that it's another chosen one plot or whatever, where you're trying to uncover your identity, while also trying to uncover the mystery of the Iron Throne, which is a far more grounded, gritty political plot than maybe I was expecting. This is a low-level D&D campaign, and I do think that this main story thread, feels appropriate for the power level of your party.
I agree. It's actually quite grounded in reality, the stuff that the villains are doing, surprisingly, and in some ways that I think that ends up being to the game's detriment in terms of environment variety and the things you fight variety, but I don't really have any complaints about like the story as it's presented makes a lot of sense. The actions that the characters take make a lot of sense, even though for an RPG, the stakes are high in some ways, but it's not like
the world is ending.
Yeah, it's not like the world is ending. Like, these events are kind of isolated to the Sword Coast, like just near Baldur's Gate. So, it was kind of cool that way. And it kind of, like, this low-level grounding does leave it a bit open for you to do a lot of exploration, which I think is a big focus on, or at least for me, particularly on in the early game, where because you are so weak at level 1, as you said, feels very coin flippy whether you win or lose fights sometimes. Because you basically double your health when you get to level 2, which adds a lot of survivability. So early game, I was very, very laser focused on getting as much XP and doing as many quests as I could to try and hit level 2. This was particularly important for me as a multi-classed thief cleric because I split my XP evenly between my two classes, which effectively means I get to level 2 at half the rate of a single-classed character.
Can I ask you, James? So quite early on, so you pick up Imoen, who's a thief, as your second character immediately after exiting Candlekeep, and you get told to go to the Friendly Arm Inn. You run into a lot of assassins throughout this game who are trying to murder you, but this, for me, was the first point where I was like, what the hell is wrong with this game? Because there is a mage waiting outside the Friendly Arm Inn, and it was a very tough fight for me. It probably took me, 10 to 15 tries to beat this single mage.
Me too. I had that exact same experience. It was like, what the hell is going on? It was that, and it was either the ogre or the troll, like the big ogre dude to the south of the Friendly Arm, which took me a lot of goes until I finally got my kiting strategy down pat. But yeah, this was kind of the point where I realized, this isn't a tight, balanced tactical game. This is a winner takes all, do everything you have to do to survive kind of scrap, right?
Well, how do you feel about this? Like, the game is making your character absurdly vulnerable, and probably if you're a straight fighter, you are less vulnerable. But even then, the mage casts horror on you, and you lose control of your character for 1 minute. For a full minute, your character is running around the screen doing nothing, and you're sitting there with your phone waiting for the spell to end. However, you can make the argument that this does give you a real, I guess, sense of immersion in the world of Baldur's Gate because you are just at this point a random dude. Do you think that the upside of selling that vulnerability at a low level is worth the, I guess, the annoyance of the actual gameplay experience?
I tend to agree it is, although it kind of plays out in a way I don't really enjoy in this game. Like in tabletop, it feels that way too, but because of the existence of quick save, I think they go too far in how threatening some things are. So you will just get like one shot out of nowhere in this game quite often. You feel just as threatened in tabletop, but it's pretty less frequent that some guy just rocks up and one shots your whole party like unexpectedly.
Is that because the DM's being kind, or do you have a DM who's a pure
It
mechanical person
depends.
who doesn't mind killing you? Because I
It
feel
de-
like a lot of that is the tabletop decision
yeah,
to kind of like the DM will tweak dice rolls. This is a video game. There's no tweaking dice rolls in your favor here. If they roll a
and
critical hit, you will die.
yeah, and just like, and oftentimes, you'll suspect that they put you to one health instead of outright killing your
Yeah.
character, or they do like they give you an injury or something, like something that keeps the thing moving narratively and keeps the tension up, but without just completely, stopping the campaign or something,
Mm.
right? Like the having a moderator, I think, makes having a system based around dice rolls a lot less frustrating. Um,
That being said,
we
there are things they could do differently here. Like, and this is very obviously not what D&D typically does, but in this game, if you reach 0 hit points, you die and you need to be resurrected. If you hit minus 10 points, your character gets gibbed and your character cannot be resurrected. They're dead, dead,
Yep,
dead. And if your main character dies, they also just die. Your character is not allowed to die in this game at all. The game will you get a game over screen if that happens.
very annoying.
What could happen instead is your character falls unconscious and then they have a wound of some kind that gives them a big penalty to their stats that you need to pay to remove it. And then you, instead of reloading when your character dies or a couple of your weaker characters die, you might persevere with the wounds until you reach the next town. So Baldur's Gate 1's decision, and this is how they were done back in the day, but obviously I don't think modern games do this in the same way. Uh, you can have characters be wounded and remove the need to quick save and quick load as well.
Yeah, there's also such a huge variance in HP. Like, I don't know about you, but I think like one of my wizards had like 4 health at level 1 or something, whereas my character had like 12.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of crazy. They'll just fall over to a stiff breeze and they have no armor either. Like, they've.
Even at 8 HP, because my character I think had 6 HP or 8 HP, and they just died to a wolf. A wolf just attacked him and did 8 damage. So 8
Yeah.
damage is just a high damage roll, and you die.
But to go back to what you were saying, like for an RPG with this power progression where you start off as pathetic and end up as like super powerful, like they do really have to sell like that feeling of uselessness to you early for it to feel right. So yeah, in two minds about this. It does make for a very frustrating gameplay experience though early on, and I don't know about you, but my level 1 lasted forever.
Yeah, what I mean, I was playing a sorcerer, so sorcerers do level up slowly, but I'm pretty sure you would have been leveling up even slower than me with the dual class.
Yeah.
So at the friendly I'm in, you can pick up a couple of, I guess you'd call them the canon NPCs, Jahira and Kaled, both of which are relatively strong NPCs. This game has a lot of NPCs. I think it has
Oh
25
yeah.
or 30. Like, it's
Yeah.
actually ridiculous how many you can pick up over the course of the game. The trade off to this, of course, is that these NPCs are not as detailed as the NPCs in, say, Mass Effect or even Baldur's Gate
That
2, which famously expanded on a lot of these character archetypes. They are very simple. The quests they have are simple. They actually have a lot of stuff programmed into them. Like they have interactions with many, many, many other characters in the game, but because there are 30 other characters, you might only see a sliver of what they actually have.
My experience was that often I would get a character, get 2 paragraphs of text, and then they would never talk again for the rest of the game. So like comparing it to those other games isn't quite doing this justice. The characters are very underwritten in my opinion. Like they have like the most characterization most of them give is their like voice lines when you click on them, which is what you'll be hearing the most. But most of my party, I got absolutely nothing out of them for the vast majority of the game, and I don't exactly want them to be talking non-stop or to have a say in every single conversation. I think that can get exhausting. But for me personally, this was actually a big low point of the game for me, was that I didn't really give a shit about any of the characters, no matter how many I tried to recruit, just because they didn't give me anything to work with.
The big thing is they don't comment on what's happening as the story progresses,
at
because
all.
this story has a progression where you kind of are like being led from one mystery or one I guess one crime to the next. Like you're going from a mine to a bandit camp, and you're kind of delving deeper and deeper into unraveling this mystery. And the characters will comment on their initial thing, like Jahira and Caled want to go to the first mine, but then they're in it for the long haul, confronting the big bad at the middle of Baldur's Gate, and you don't get anything from that point to the end. I agree with you, James. I think this is too light a touch. I think in a party RPG, you need a bit more than what's here.
I was ready for you to say that you were like on board with this level of talking.
I think that even for me, this was too little. Like this was
Okay.
this was basically a mechanical experience for me in large part. I do think that there is a trend in modern RPGs, and this is something that actually irritates me a lot about Baldur's Gate 3. I don't actually like the writing in Baldur's Gate 3, and a large part of that is because all of the companions you have, they're all like insufferably smug and fucking annoying. Like I don't like any of the companions in Baldur's Gate 3. Like at worst there are a couple that are interesting or kind of inoffensive to my sensibilities, but I do not like them. And it feels to me overdone how much the story seems to revolve around your companions. Um, Baldur's Gate 1 is like a breath of relief from that, but at the same time, I think it goes too far in the other direction. I think I need something a bit more in the middle where the characters are still invested and engaging with what you are doing as a character and the plot that is progressing, even if the story doesn't revolve around them. So I kind of agree. I think that the companions here are too light a touch to really get invested in.
Hot take, and I know this is an opinion that not many people seem to have, but I actually despise it when the entire game seems to revolve around the main character and nothing else, and the other characters you have are pretty much inconsequential to the plot, like they don't have their own motivations and stuff like that, and things they want to do, and their own stake in the plot. I find it like I can't really take it seriously when the game's going out of its way to tell me how much of a hotshot I am, having done literally nothing of note. You know,
I didn't really feel that about this game though. Like,
no, I didn't.
I think that the plotting was less about, and obviously the character does have a personal connection to what's going on, but it felt far more like they were trying to do the right thing as opposed to them being the chosen one, you know? And I did say this was a chosen one story, but it doesn't feel like that in the typical sense where, you know, you get mentored and that feels like the more low key side to all of the actual, you know, chasing up all of the politics and mystery of what's actually happening. That felt like the core of the story to me.
I agree with that. It's one thing that I like about tabletop is because you play with a party of 6 actual people. There isn't this like one chosen one person in the party. It's like everyone's an important character at once. But yeah, I agree. I didn't feel that way too much in this game. But yeah, like the lack of characters having a personality, like the extended edition characters actually do have more substantial quests and talk more often.
Mm.
So like I think I ended up having Nira talk the most, so she ended up being the character I had the most opinion about compared to everyone else who I was like, I have zero opinion about these characters. They're just like blank slates with 3 voice lines, you know. So I don't know. It to me, it makes it hard to be invested in my party when I care so little, or the game gives me so little to care about.
Yeah, it ultimately comes down to the broader mystery of the plot versus the party, and the party is
Yeah,
definitely a bit of a letdown, I think. Even though I did like the focus on the main plot, they definitely could have done more here.
yeah.
Uh,
Should we do a music break?
we
This
should
is going to be
absolutely
a
have a
really
music
long
break.
episode,
It
and
will be.
it feels like we're only 20 minutes in, but we're actually like 50. So we're probably going to have a few of these. I think the best place to start is probably the main menu music. In general, I was pretty high on the music in this game and the sound effects, even like the spellcasting, voice lines, the battle music. The only one that Pat and we were talking about this before, agree on that is bad is the music in one of the inns. I think it's
Which repeats.
nonstop.
The
It's like
default. Oh no, like it's in multiple ends as well.
it's just the friendly arm music. Oh my god.
It's so
Uh,
bad. It is really, really bad. It really stands out compared to the rest of the music, which is to me absolutely fantastic.
yeah, it's good, and it's like on theme too, and it has tone. It's tonally consistent for the most part. I really enjoyed it. So the main menu theme sticks in my head because it always played when I opened the game, and I always like lingered there like a second longer than I would have normally. Which the only other game I can think of that was like Pathologic 1. I did that a bit on because the main menu theme is great. But yeah, just top stuff here. Have basically no complaints about the audio.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that it captures the feeling of exploration with these far lighter pieces. When combat starts, it is these booming horns, drums that really get you excited to fight. And as James said, the main music is just epic. It's just absolutely epic. So I love the soundtrack of this game. I think it's one of the strongest ones we've done in terms of being holistically excellent in that there's probably no bad tracks except that one in music theme, and it's a very memorable one. So yeah, absolutely adore the music. Here is the main music theme.
Alrighty, that was the theme of Baldur's Gate 1. It was really, really good. Patrick, where did you want to move on to next in terms of discussion?
Well, let's keep going. So we've recruited some companions here. You can recruit. There are a lot of companions. You can recruit. There are some good ones. There are some evil ones. There are some neutral ones. There is a mechanic here, once again, not explained at all, that kind of stops you having a mixed party, which is that if your positive reputation gets really, really high towards the max, then evil characters will leave your party. Likewise, if your evil reputation gets really, really, really bad or really, really high, depending on how you view it, then your good characters will leave the party. It is possible to keep a reputation level somewhere in the middle, but if you're playing this as like just a typical, following the plot, doing the right thing kind of guy, which I think most people are going to do for your first playthrough, you should just pick good characters. Otherwise, you might end up in a very awkward situation when an evil character leaves your party with a bunch of gear that you've put on them. And I think that is something that
Yeah.
just can happen, which does cut you off from a lot of characters. But honestly, there are so many here that that's barely a downside. You still have access to 15 different characters to round up 15 6-member party, and there's a great variety of casters, clerics, a lot of thieves, plenty of fighters. There is enough here no matter what you do.
Yeah, so how would you say your early game went in terms of like progressing? Like as a sorcerer, you wouldn't have had access to many spells. Like how are you working your way through the game? How are you trying to gain advantages? How are you trying to, progress with the party that you came together with?
So basically, after you leave, you can pick up quests in this game. The quests in this game, it's important to note, are not like modern RPGs where there will be icons or exclamation marks hovering above people's heads. You will go into a town and you will speak to every single person with a name, hoping that they have an information or a quest to give you. Maybe, I don't know, 1/3 to half of the quests will be found in these towns. But in much the same way, a lot of these quests are going to be discovered organically in the locations you're exploring. So it's less of a hub model, even though the hubs are definitely there and a good location to go to. They are not the be all and end all. There is a big focus on exploration. So I would go into these places, in some instances, break into people's homes so that I
Hmm.
could get the quest from them, which felt very strange, but you need to speak to everyone. In fact, I got a lot of quests from breaking into homes. So just keep in mind, break into houses so that you can speak to the person so they can give you a quest. And then I would go and explore. You have a main quest at the start, which is kind of like guiding you along to head towards the mines. But in order to get to the mines, you need to travel across screens, which is different from Fallout and it's different from Baldur's Gate 3. So the idea is that the way to think about Baldur's Gate 1 is that it is a bunch of massive screens stuck together. So you have your locations, which are the cities mostly, and then you have interconnected bits, which will be the areas between the cities, which are also screens. So basically, you'll have a city, say Candlekeep, then you will have 3 to 4 screens, which are full screens to explore. Which you need to physically travel from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen in order to transition to the next screen. Um, as you move along, once you have discovered an area, you can travel to it at will. But the first time you go across it, you need to physically move your party across the screen. Uh, we talked a lot about vulnerability before, James, and this is where you kind of get to the crux of the early to mid game Baldur's Gate experience, which I would say hinges heavily on exploration. Because you will probably not be of the right level to do the main quest without exploring and engaging with side quests to level up. So for me, I would say the early to mid part of this game was vested in exploration, and it was
Hmm.
Baldur Gate 1's specific brand of exploration. So, how did you feel about the exploration in this game, and would you agree that that is the core of the early to mid game experience?
I would agree with that, yeah. So I did a lot of exploring and questing early on. I pretty much went into every house, talked to everyone, tried to do every single quest I could, every single area. And like the way I describe the map is that there's like a world map which has like icons on it. Like it'll have a forest icon with a name that like you click on it and it's like it'll take you 8 hours to travel here. And then that forest will have a big square with fog of war that you have to slowly work your way through. It'll be filled with enemies, sometimes more quests. And yeah, basically the first third of my game was primarily spent in a bunch of forests, running around, killing the wildlife, killing the wolves, fighting ogres, fighting gibberlines, little things, then going to bigger towns, getting more quests, handing quests in repeat until I'd finally hit level 2. But yeah, that was by far that was the most common thing I was doing. One criticism I have about the exploration, so we mentioned that the story is pretty grounded, and I definitely agree with that. One caveat to this, I think, is that the environments are very grounded too, which means that the vast majority of your time in this game, at least in the early game for me, was spent in forest environments, like 6 to 8 different giant screens of forest, which mostly, they're a forest. They have some wolves in them. There's the occasional NPC, but they're honestly fairly barren compared to like something in a modern game. Like, I'm not expecting every 5 steps to have something crazy because that's super unrealistic, but it did feel a bit samey to me after a while. But I guess that's just the cost of having a more grounded narrative.
Yeah, Baldur's Gate, the exploration, it isn't dense. It is open and sparse. So per screen, there might be 3 things. There might be a quest or a particular combat where a person has a unique item. But the process of discovering those things, I use what I call the lawnmower method, where I would just kind of do loops, increasingly smaller loops, until I got to the center of the screen. And it felt a bit stupid the way I was going about it, because I was just trying to uncover every single pixel of the fog of war to uncover every single thing on the screen.
Yeah.
And sometimes the things you uncover, these quests, are barely quests. Like, there was a quest where a person said, "My ring is in the shipwreck." So you walk literally 10 meters and get the ring and give him the ring. And that's the quest.
Mm.
So a lot of these quests are these tiny things. There will be a small scripted encounter, which are often fine. Like, there was one where a person had run away and was crafting gems, and a person showed up to kill him. And you could either stand aside or you could defend this person crafting the gems, that kind of thing. Um, I felt that it was boring a lot of the time.
Mm.
Even though it did sell the sense of a broader world. My favorite thing about the exploration is when I met something that absolutely crapped on me and I remembered it and got to go back later. But the actual process of uncovering and exploring, I found pretty dull.
Yeah, I would say this is a combination of the small radius of vision your characters have, meaning you have to do a lot of movement to uncover the whole map, and there's stuff there, so you might miss something if you don't do this.
There's always something there. There's always 3 things on every map, so you've got to do it.
Yeah, you're like, I want to see all the cool stuff. So, yeah, there's a small line of sight radius. The maps are quite big. They're very open too, which I think is part of the problem. Like, I think good level design guides the player towards points of interest. I do not think that Baldur's Gate 1 does that at all. I think it puts points of interest in seemingly random locations. So you basically have to uncover the whole map because there might and often is something in this, the corner of the map or this random spot away from everything else. Like, the visuals don't really feel like they're leading you to water either. And it very commonly has something hiding somewhere, like very generic. So you basically feel the need to do, as Patrick said, do tile painter and just meticulously go from one corner to the other over and over until you fill the whole map in. And, like 80% of that time, you're not actually doing anything. And there might be some trash mobs occasionally, might be like 2 quests in the whole screen. And, a lot of the screens are forests that look exactly the same from a tile set point of view. There's not a lot of I guess, variance in mood. Like, you could have a game that has lots of forests, but you could have a bright and a cheerful forest and a dark, foreboding forest. I felt like pretty much all of them were the Baldur's Gate forest to me, so it all blends together, and it takes, I don't know, like half an hour per map to clear it out.
Maybe 20 minutes.
Maybe
It
20
depends if there are
minutes.
quests or whatever, but and if there are difficult combat encounters, which can slow things down. But it takes a good chunk of time, and I think the thing is that no matter what you find, if the process of exploring is the same every time, which is this tile uncovering method, it loses a lot of the magic to me. Like
Yeah.
the thing about exploring a first person game like even something like Skyrim, or you can use Oblivion or Morrowind or whatever you like, is that when you are exploring in those games, you feel a lot more. You have a lot more, I guess, direction over which direction you explore. And the game is subtly pushing you to go in different directions, but you're really the one in charge of deciding, I'm going to go in this direction and I'm going to climb this mountain, or, oh, I saw there was a cave down there, I'll go into the cave. Baldur's Gate exploration doesn't work like that. You kind of go everywhere and you uncover the maps in the same way every single time. The thing that's interesting is when you discover an interesting quest or encounter. Like, for example, when I came upon the basilisks for the first time. Did you encounter these, James?
I encountered those very late in the game, I think. Maybe in the catacombs, like that exit bit was the first time I saw those.
Right. So there's a part of the forest where there's a mage who's surrounded by basilisks and they've turned everyone to stone, and he's crazy and he thinks that he has a garden of beautiful stone things. And the basilisks have an attack that instantly turns you to stone, and there's no save from it. Like if you don't have resistance from petrification, they just instantly kill you. And if it's your main character, instant game over. That was a cool thing to discover that wrecked me a couple of times, and I had to come up with a strategy to deal with it. And it was a fun kind of little event to stumble upon and engage with, right? Like that was really
Mm.
cool. But the process of discovering it was not cool. It was the same as it was for every single other encounter. So I think that there was probably a better way to find these things, even if the things you found were pretty interesting a lot of the time.
Yeah, normally in games with fun exploration, it's not always 100% about the things you find, but oftentimes, like, you're going through the landscape and you're thinking, I wonder how this dilapidated ruin get here. And for
Mm,
good games, there's a real answer to those questions if you're paying attention. There are a lot of areas that have nothing like that. They're just like generic forests, so
mm.
there's no engaging with the history or the world building as you're exploring, or sense of mystery or wonder. It's just kind of rote, meticulous, methodical, It reminds me of when we did Thief 2, and there was that second half of the rooftops level where you are in the like the skyscraper, and you
Mm.
kind of just go through each floor of the building, going through each room one
Identical
by
levels.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a bit exhausting. It also doesn't help that a lot of the times when you do find something in this game, because like dialogue is so underwritten, like a lot of the quests, like you said, last like 10 seconds and they're like a paragraph or something.
Mm.
So if you spend a lot of your time running around doing nothing to find these things that aren't very substantial, it grates on you a little over
It
time.
absolutely does. If the payoff is just not there, right? It's like I spent all that time and that's it. That's all you're giving me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's almost like I wish instead of doing three things, there was one thing per screen, but it was more involved and there was more history to the area. So the story that it told could be a bit more in depth and interesting with more environmental storytelling. The other thing that stood out to me, and I don't know if this is something that uh, I don't know why I had this expectation, but there wasn't that much in terms of descriptive dialogue. Like for a game like this, I want to be able to, how you'd sometimes get that little question mark icon to examine something, James?
yeah.
I wanted like
More of
descriptive
that,
dialogue.
mm, like descriptions in the world, like your character looks at something and has an opinion on it.
Yeah, almost as if it had come from a novel, It's like wisps of smoke rise through the cracks in the wood, whatever, but it felt like this game world could have
It
been
lacked
brought to life more.
immersion. Like there wasn't a reason to imagine yourself standing there. Look, it doesn't give you those kinds of. I know what you're talking about, and I hadn't thought about it, but I completely agree.
Yeah, the game didn't use descriptive dialogue to try and sell the environments to me, and I think it's something that would have been very effective here, very in theme with the world it was trying to create, and instead it just wasn't there. So it disconnected me from the world a bit. I think that the idea that I'm starting to, I guess, coagulate in my head is that this is a game that derives most of its immersion from its mechanics rather than its environment and story.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I was actually quite surprised at how cold and mechanical this game was. Like there wasn't a lot, I was expecting a lot more like role play fluff kind of stuff, but it really
Mm,
is this is just a dungeon crawler in disguise, right? At the end
mm.
of the day, which I'm okay to play given good tactical options, which hit or miss.
So let's continue on our journey. So we've done a bit of exploring in the side areas, we've gained a bit of XP, and we get to the first true dungeon of this game. So this game has dungeons. There aren't heaps of them, but they are there and they are substantial, and they're probably, I would say, they often have the hardest content, although there's plenty of that around the space. The first one you get to is Nashkel Mines. So, James, I warned you a little bit about how these dungeon crawling things tend to work because they have a particular rhythm to them. Generally, it's recommended that you have a thief in your party because
Yep,
the thief has the abilities detect traps, they can disarm traps, and they can unpick locks.
yep.
And the way it is, I would say, maybe not suggested, but the way that I thought that this worked is you send your thief out who would with detect traps turned on, they would detect the traps, which would then open the way for the rest of your party. My experience with this when I first started playing was absolutely miserable and I hated it. How did you feel, James? Was this was this fun to you? Were the dungeons all they were cracked up to be?
So in tabletop, my experience is a lot of it is reconnaissance and scouting and carefully moving forward, trying to figure out what kinds of enemies are in the next room, that kind of thing. Because generally with tabletop systems, it's very important to understand the foes that you're up against because they normally have very pronounced abilities or weaknesses, vulnerabilities. Oftentimes, levels are designed such that if you explore, you can find alternate routes for flanking positions, or like you can find cool items that are like you find a silver bullet and there's a werewolf in the dungeon on the
Mm.
other side of the dungeon, that kind of thing. And it rewards you for your character's high intelligence score lets you know what a werewolf is, or your thief lets you get into a weird spot, that kind of thing. With Baldur's Gate 1, yeah, it's a lot of because finding traps, and I think this is what you're referring to, works on rounds. So your character only looks for traps once every 6 seconds, which means that if you walk forward too quickly, you'll often walk into a trap before you have a chance to roll to find it. So what you actually have to do is turn find traps on. It's not on by default, and if you do anything, it turns off. You have to walk
Including
forward.
disarming a trap.
Yeah, you have to walk forward a couple of steps, stand still for 6 seconds, confirm that there's no traps, walk forward for another few inches, wait, walk forward, wait, repeat until you come into range of enemies, at which point you get the rest of your party to catch back up to you, and then you see if there's like a flanking position maybe, and yeah, oftentimes they just spot you and combat starts. It's not very interesting, and like with the open world exploration, I would say that dungeon design in this game isn't particularly dynamic. Like with the mines in particular, I would describe it as like there's a central hub with it's like a hand with fingers going off into lots of dead ends, and
Mine
there'll be
shafts. Yeah.
yeah, mine shafts that lead to nothing, like nothing at all.
Often with traps in
Um,
front of them as well.
Yeah, so you'll spend resources getting to nothing. There's no secret passages a lot of the time.
Oh, that killed me. The lack of secret passages, man. Like I love secret passages in dungeons. I feel that they bring them to life. Or it's like doors that require keys. There's no doors that require keys in this game. It's just there's no backtracking. It's all just a fairly linear progression.
There generally aren't puzzles either. Or
Now
there
there
aren't
is one big mega dungeon in this game that
that
was
has
added.
puzzles. Yep.
There is probably the exception to all this. So I do want to shout out Durlag's Tower, which I didn't actually finish because I needed to finish the game. But that is apparently people think very highly of that. So I just want to shout that out. We're talking about pretty much every other dungeon.
Yeah, but pretty much every other dungeon in the game is bland in terms of layout, has surprisingly little enemy variety, and encounters are pretty much always fight begins. There's no like, well, my character wasn't very good at charisma, so I never base talked my way out of anything almost.
Oh, you can't do that anyway.
Oh, really? Oh, that's a
There's
shame.
there's a little bit of it, but in general, that's the other thing about this game. A lot of the stats in this game don't actually matter,
Yeah.
which is funny because I was like, look, read guys to find like what stats were good for a sorcerer, and they're like, yeah, so Constitution matters, Strength matters because it lets you carry a lot of stuff, so definitely have a high Strength and have high Dexterity because that'll affect
Give you AC.
your chance to hit, and then the rest of the stats are irrelevant. I was like, what?
Well,
What do you
it's
mean
pretty.
they're irrelevant?
I wouldn't say they're irrelevant. Like wisdom gives you save, which is really important. Charisma for a
Charisma so
sorcerer should
doesn't affect
be
your casting as a sorcerer at all in Baldur's Gate 1.
really.
Yeah. This is the
Ah,
thing. Second edition is very different.
interesting. Because yeah, charisma's like in 3 and onwards is your main casting stat.
Yeah, not in this game. Charisma
Okay,
makes things in shops cheaper, so that's good.
cool. Well, that's fun. But yeah, dungeon variety very low.
Like I said, I really want to emphasize how unfun it is to progress through the dungeon because this is what you're doing. You can't be invisible and detect traps at the same time unless I guess you drink a potion of invisibility or someone casts invisibility on you. So you are inching forward with your rogue, and then a kobold archer will start attacking you. So you run back, and then but you can't bring your party past that point where your thief was detecting traps, and there's a second archer that you didn't notice. So you bring your rogue back and you do this over and over and over and over again. And most of the encounters in the dungeon are just small groups of weak enemies that your rogue can't kill alone, but which aren't actually challenging for your party to do. And I hated it so much that when I was trying to figure out how this trap working happened, I cheated, James. I installed a mod that instantly revealed traps to my rogue as soon as I was in range.
Assuming they had the right skill, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
assuming they had the right skill, but basically instead of it being on a 6 second timer, it was now on a microsecond timer, so it would instantly tick over as soon as you go into range, and it dramatically improved the experience. But even then, it still wasn't enormously fun. I didn't really get this feeling of if you had been able to hide in shadows and get rid of traps while remaining hidden in shadows, but I don't know, enemy detection range increased slightly, so you could kind of properly scout out. I think I would have enjoyed this a lot more, but the execution here was painful to me.
Well, I guess it's finally time for me to talk about the star of my playthrough, which is a spell that I believe is unique to the Thief Cleric spell list when you're multiclassed, is a spell called Sanctuary, which for my money is just the most overpowered spell I've seen in a video game, full stop. So Sanctuary is a self buff. You cast it on yourself, and it makes it so that other characters can't perceive you. It's not invisibility. It doesn't get beaten by true sight. It's that the characters' brains refuse to acknowledge your existence. So you can walk around with Sanctuary on. It's a level 1 spell, and you can do things like look for traps. You can disarm traps.
Oh my god.
You can pick pockets. You can unlock chests. You can pick doors. And I would say I was starting to wonder if my playthrough was less fun because I had this spell. So I want to give an example from later on in the game.
Mm.
Later on in the game, when I was getting towards the end, I did a quick Google to see which quests people thought were the most interesting because I wanted to do them for the sake of the review. And I saw time and time again that people said the Thieves Guild is one of the absolute most interesting quests. So basically, the first Thieves Guild quest has you do this long series of things in order to get to the top floor of a character's house in order to get these priceless artifacts. There's like a few layers to this cake, basically, which involve a bunch of social skills and sneaking and disarming to get through floor A, B, and C. And then, like on the third floor, where the thing is, there are these three characters that instantly try to talk to you, and it's a bit of a mess if you can't talk your way out of it. My experience with the quest was I get to floor 3. I'm just scouting the house. I don't really do anything. I get spotted, instantly killed. Okay, reload my save. Cast Sanctuary. Walk to the top floor. Walk past everyone. Pick the lock. Take the thing. Leave. That was the whole quest. And that was my experience with any quest that involved sneaking. North of, like a bit south of Baldur's Gate City, there's a quest where the farmer's son has been missing. I don't know if you found that one.
Is that the one with the end kegs in the...
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
And you have to go into the big hole, and it's this big maze. Yeah. So my experience with that was I cast Sanctuary, I walk around in the hole till I find the body, I leave, didn't have any combat. That was it.
Oh, that is amazing. And that would fix a lot of the problems I have with the thief, because you can basically be invisible while unlocking the traps and scout out and stuff. Listen, I've looked it up while you were speaking, so it seems like it's just a priest spell, but the idea is that it's only castable on self. So it's specifically useful for thief clerics because they're the ones who can disarm traps and stuff. Yeah. Very interesting. That changes a lot, actually. Wow.
Yeah, so I got to scout traps a lot. I actually, it was a bit of a problem because I didn't put points into sneaking on on my main character at all because I had that.
Sanctuary, right.
Yeah, and in the final boss fight, which was particularly lethal, my main character sat in a corner of the room with Sanctuary on, not participating, so they wouldn't die and instantly get my run killed.
Game over, yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Does this mean that you're, like, for me, the dungeon crawling experience ended up being pretty painful overall? There were some parts of the dungeons that I enjoyed with some fights. For example, so to balance out what I'm saying a bit, one of my favorite fights in the game is it was at the end of the second mines you did, so the Cloakwood mines. So there's a bit where there's the boss of the dungeon is sitting behind 5 traps. Like there's 5 traps in a line, and this was before I'd installed the mod. And he discovers you before you disarm the final trap, and then starts buffing himself and casting spells and everything. And I found that fight very enjoyable because he's like teleporting from room to room with Dimension Door. And you're trying to chase him, and I had to make the decision to just run through the traps to catch up to him. And, you know, he was crowd controlling some of my party members. I was trying to disable the crowd control. And the space was big enough that all of this could happen.
That was one of the few fights that I felt like had level design in them, whereas I think 90% of the fights in this game, unfortunately, are just like a room with nothing. Like, there's no verticality, there's no like flanking spots often, there's no kiting around pillars even, there's no, I don't know, like even something as simple as like, I feel like Divinity 1, like Original Sin 1, has more design in its combat encounters than this game by like a lot.
Definitely from an environmental standpoint, that's true. And there's some of these dungeons are just atrocious. They're literally like narrow corridors, just lots of narrow corridors. And I'm like, what compelled them to make this dungeon like this? One of them, I don't know if you went to the Firewine Ruins.
No.
Yeah, so it's literally just a bunch of corridors, and you run into a mage that casts lightning, and the lightning
Yeah.
bounces a lot, and you die. And I'm
I
like,
did that myself a lot to enemies. Like in the second mine area near the end, there are all these rooms that are just filled with people, like the guard quarters. My only way to beat them was to run my mage and cast like lightning bolt at an angle around a corner and like keep doing that until everything was dead. Yeah, that happened to me in reverse a lot as well.
yeah, which in and of itself isn't a
It's
bad thing.
fine. Yeah.
Like chain lightning being a spell that bounces is a cool kind of thing, but
Yep.
the level design is just like I don't know. It's uninspired in a lot of instances. Is the word I'd use. I think that a lot of level design is uninspired. It feels rough. It feels like a rough draft. Like they didn't really when they sat down to build these dungeons, they weren't like, let's make a fantastic dungeon, which is what Durlake's Tower felt like. It was just like, we need to get a dungeon, just throw it together. We'll chuck some enemies in and it'll be a dungeon. That's what it feels like.
They felt immersive to the point of like detriment, like they were just real places. So real places don't have interesting level design, right? Like, it's just a house.
I don't know. Thief has some mansions which are like real places, and those are cool.
Yeah, but they're all like, there's a lot of suspension of disbelief to make those into cool game levels, right?
It is true. The mansion in the sword isn't what I'd call a realistic mansion.
Yeah, but it's that kind of like bending the rules that lets you spice things up, which was sorely lacking here for me, especially in the early game.
Then there was like the Knoll encampment, which was literally 30 Knolls just stacked on top of one another in a tiny space. Did you go there?
Absolutely went there.
I was like, what is this place? Like, I'm not even kidding. I don't know how many it is, like 20 or 25, but there's 20 or 25 just sitting in a clump. I was like, what were they thinking with this? Like, what was the thought process behind this? It's like, it's a Knoll encampment, so it has a lot of Knolls.
Yeah, I went there to do Minsker's quest because he's cool and I wanted him in my party. And then I got the second character and realized like they come as a pair. So I already had a wizard, so I didn't want a second wizard, so I didn't keep him. That coming in a pair thing is kind of weird because online everyone's like, yeah, just get the second character killed, Lamau.
Yeah.
It's like, that doesn't feel, I don't know, it's kind of like immersion breaking to do that to me. Like,
I mean, I guess they're just saying it's an option, like
yeah.
if you really want one character but not the other, there is a way around it.
Yeah, like it didn't help that like I had Nera the Wild Mage because she's one of the extended edition characters and it has more dialogue, seemed more interesting. And I've always just kind of liked wild magic and the like chaos.
Because it's funny.
It's hilarious. There was like one time I cast Sleep and instead she cast Lightning Bolt and just one-shot like 8 dudes, like at level 1 or something. It was like, what? There was another time where she summoned a cow from the sky and just like gibbed herself. That was funny the first time. The second time that happened was in the final boss fight when I almost won after like 100 retries. Infuriating, but then
that's what you take.
That's what you sign up for, right?
Exactly.
So it was funny.
Is there any way to mitigate the randomness, or is it just random from start to finish?
You could choose not to use the spell that's like has a 50% chance of using the right spell.
Okay, so it kind of like gives you a buffed version or something, but it
no, basically it lets you, when you select Reckless Dwemer, you get to pick any wizard spell full stop.
Right.
So you almost like if you prepare 5, it's like you have access to every spell basically, but it's unpredictable.
How does it work? Like, how can you just always use it with low level spells and hope to roll high level spells?
Maybe, but you may as well just pick the high level spell because it's a level 1 spell, so you can pick Fireball with it.
Okay, right. Okay.
Yeah. Honestly, I didn't use it that much as the game went on. Honestly, the amount of friendly fire that wizard spells do in this game made me like avoid using the wizard whenever I could.
Well, the other thing is that, and this is something that this is an area where I wish the game had provided more clarity to the player, because I think a lot of people overstate the complexity of this game from the perspective of how it affects your decision making. This game is really, really complicated. There's a lot of shit in the background going on, But in most instances, it doesn't really matter. Like if you knew or understood this versus this, it's not like you'd be like, oh, so I'm going to use this spell instead, or oh, I'm going to use this character positioning in this spot instead of this spot. It just doesn't affect your decision making. Where it does is that the game doesn't display AoE indicators for different spells and abilities.
Yeah.
So there is a description where it will say 15 foot across, but that is so, it's not like there's a ruler on the screen that indicates what 15 foot is. You don't know how big a fireball is until you cast it and keep casting it, and then it's still a lot of guesswork involved in trying to get an understanding for what how big a fireball is. I think some people might make the argument that that's how it would work for, in tabletop anyway, where you do have to kind of guess and hope you don't friendly fire your teammates. But because the game is real time with pause and because people are moving around, the game's already hard enough to get a clear understanding on, I guess, the relative positions of everyone and where they're going to be.
Yeah.
So I think this game would be better if you could see area of effect indicators prior to casting the spell, all of these various AoE spells.
I agree, because I just avoided them other than cheese situations for that very reason. I basically, like, my wizard existed to cast haste near the end of the game, and that was pretty much it. Other
Really?
some strength buffs, yeah.
Wow.
Like, yeah. I just, it
My wizard
annoyed.
did a lot of things.
Yeah, mine it annoyed the shit out of me, so I just didn't bother. Like that,
Wow.
if it had been turn based and if you had indicators, I would have used it a lot more. But I basically only used it if the fight was too hard to not. Like early on, I used sleep and web a lot, but near the end of the game, those spells didn't cut it. The ones that did had pretty dire consequences if you used them poorly. So, they cast haste, which has always been super good, and maybe some buffs. I just didn't want to deal with it.
I've been wondering about this. So the difference between wizards and sorcerers is that wizards can scribe scrolls to their spell book, right?
Yeah, I
So
don't know about spell preparation with your sorceress. Did you prepare spells?
no, you just have your spells that you know. So you
Yeah,
don't.
and you have a certain number, right?
Yeah. So and it wasn't very many. So I didn't have very many spells. However, I could still cast scrolls to kind of like get a one-off effect of this. And I wonder if this actually improved my experience because I had the spells I knew and I wasn't using a wizard. I was just using my scrolls to try different things all the time. Like I would get a scroll of dire charm, which lets you mind control someone. And I'd be like, all right, in this fight, I'm going to try to use my scroll of dire charm. And that happened a lot. I was just using different scrolls to get different effects all the time because my base pool of spells were limited in terms of utility. So I felt like I had them as cool resources to try in different battles.
Yeah, I had not that experience. I felt that half the time when I used scrolls, it didn't like give me the payoff I wanted. So what ended up happening was I saved almost every scroll and potion for the last fight. Maybe some ones got used occasionally. Like I used lightning bolt and fireball ones a lot actually. But I had a lot of stuff to use on the last fight. I had a party that had me as a cleric thief,
Mhm.
a pure cleric, Jahira as a druid. So I had basically 3 divine casters and then a wizard. The divine casters normally, so my main character would prepare command a lot. So
Mm,
command knocks things down, and when things are knocked down,
they're stunned.
you don't have to roll to hit them. My party had a terrible chance to hit. Khalid's strength is terrible. Jahira doesn't hit very well. My character was all in on dex, so they didn't hit very well. Imoen was my most reliable attacker. So what I normally did was command or paralyze big enemies and then just auto hit them to death because the
Mhm.
party did damage when they hit. They just hit poorly. which is another reason I cast haste a lot, because the more you attack, the more chances you have to hit, basically. But they were very, very durable. Because I have three characters that have access to heal, I have so much sustain in my party that you can effectively box select right click most encounters and then just heal up and not worry too much that you took a bunch of damage. So like that was pretty dull, honestly. I think if I was to play this game again, I would play with like one person that has heal, so I was forced to use tactics more, but my party comp meant that I could brute force most encounters, honestly, which was a bit
Wow.
like unfun.
I have to say that is very different from my experience because while there were a lot of like trash mob encounters that I was able to easily dispose with auto attacks, I felt like I was utilizing a lot of spells and a lot of spell casting, particularly for the more, I guess, difficult encounters. And I was using different strategies for a lot of them. I didn't really use potions much. There were a couple of times when I did, but they were very
Hmm.
rare. But definitely scrolls and spells I used a lot. My party wasn't too different from yours. So I had my main character that was a sorcerer. I had Kaled and Jahira. I had the a priest. Did you say you had a priest?
The Tempest Cleric, the
Yes.
one that
So I
was
had her.
the statue, yeah.
Yeah, then I had the paladin. You find a paladin north who's mostly just a fighter guy, but I had him as a two-hander fighter beefer. And then I had Imoen, of course. I had
Yeah.
Imoen, who was my thief. So for me, and I employed different strategies. Like, for example, web. Web is a fucked up spell. Web is a
Yeah.
spell is the kind of spell that you would just not see in modern RPG design ever. It's wildly
Uh,
oh, it's a thing, is it?
I don't know. In Wrath of the Righteous, it's still a spell, right? Like
To,
there is,
really?
it's
Okay.
the same spell. Yeah.
To me, it felt ridiculous in that it was like it lasted, I don't know how long, 45 seconds, and it
Yep.
applied repeated stun effects in a huge area of effect. Um,
Oh boy, yeah. Did you ever cast Stinking Cloud?
I didn't
uh,
actually, but I did cast Cloud Kill once. But
yeah, those
it
spells still a thing in modern tabletop. Yep.
right. The thing that was weird for me about Web is that it felt like such a enormously debilitating effect that filled the entire screen that if you were aware of it and manipulated it, kind of gave you a free
I
win
win.
against most encounters in the game. But if you kind of treated it normally, so you sent some fighters into melee and it was just a big random chance thing. But
Yeah.
what I did was like I found a sword, a two-handed sword that gave my paladin immunity from web, and there's a level 4 free spell that grants immunity from web, and then I made Kaled an archer when I planned to use this strategy, and I could wreck pretty much anything. And it was too strong, so I kind of stopped using it and started playing around with the other options at my disposal. Did you find yourself doing that? Because normally you and I are very optimal kind of gamers, and that we want to win. But with this game, I did a lot of more fucking around with different strategies when things seem too strong.
So for me, it was either I face roll things not quickly, like combats against trash mobs took a long time because my characters miss constantly, but
Wow.
they were quite tough. So eventually, like things just die. If there was one big dude, normally they get commanded and died, or held
Mm.
person and died. Normally, the things that was tough was against lots of enemies. One thing I did a lot was something I hadn't realized until a bit, like, like 6 hours in, is that enemies will follow you through screen transitions often, often quite large distances. So if enemies were numerous, which was when I had the most difficulty,
Mm.
I would generally like try to aggro small amounts and drag them through doors and pick them off one by one in a different room. Or I would use sleep or web to set up a better condition, or yeah, that or I would just burn through 6 uses of command to burn things down quickly.
Okay.
Or I would get things trapped in corridors and lightning bolt. That was pretty much the strategy I used to get through the whole game, was those three.
Yeah, so I would be doing things like so when mages take damage, their spells get interrupted. So there's a couple of priest spells that Jaheira gets access to call lightning and summon insects. Summon insects was like an anti-caster spell. Uh the priest gets access to miscast magic, which also very good against enemy casters. Then you've got your dispels and your like spell thrusts to remove enemy protections. My mage had various crowd control abilities. So he had sleep, of course, blindness. He had self defense abilities. He had offensive abilities by the end of the game. So I could actually use him to tank attacks towards the end of the game, which felt crazy and imbalanced, but he could.
I guess now that I think about it, with casters, the thing I normally tried to do was cast Sanctuary on my main guy,
Yeah.
walk him to behind the caster, walk my main party in to trigger the combat, and then like immediately command like knock down the mage next to my main dude before he can cast mirror image, and then hit him and shoot him with arrows while he was on the ground.
Right.
Before he could cast a spell, or cast silence on my cleric from like that breaks Sanctuary, but like if you get the cast
You've
off, then
cast it already. Yeah. This
yeah,
sanctuary spell seems unbelievably strong.
yeah, yeah, game
Yeah, no,
breaking.
I would do like I said, I would find these scrolls because you can find scrolls at a higher level. The ones are really good.
Yep,
You've got the ones of fireball and chain lightning, but there's more than that. There's a wand of
fear.
polymorphing. There's a wand of paralyzation, which kind of gets you a command effect. There's a wand of summon monsters. Did you use that one very much? That was
The
unbelievably strong because it just puts a bunch of meat in the way of you and the enemy.
I'm glad that I never used it until the last encounter, because I don't know if I would have beaten the game if I hadn't had a full wand of that. Honestly,
This is all to say that for me, at least, with this combat, when you had the good combat encounters, and there are a few of them that stand out to me, it's generally the ones where you're fighting an enemy party.
yep,
The combat's really fun. Like I really enjoyed the combat, and there was a lot of like reloading and experimentation and iteration, trying different things. It's like, okay, I've got this potion which is just a fireball. I'm going to chuck it on this person. I'm going to drink this potion and see what happens. I'm going to use a scroll and see what happens. And it would work sometimes and it wouldn't work sometimes. And I'd get insta-gibbed sometimes, and other times I'd get a good advantage. I would try to be proactive with my magic and do damage. Sometimes I would be more crowd control orientated. Sometimes I'd be more focused on dispelling and reacting to the enemy casters.
yep.
And I agree with you that, like you said, that sometimes it's just about dice rolls and how they go. But in the same way, that makes it feel very dynamic. It feels like things are happening in ways where you have to react to them, as opposed to you being in a total vice control grip of the situation because you followed the right steps in executing the fight. And that's always had a special appeal to me. These more dynamic encounters that filter out in different ways depending on what happened. So this is all to say that I found the combat, the scrappy, disorganized, messy, option-filled combat of Baldur's Gate 2 to in some ways be superior to modern party RPGs, but not in a way that eliminates the feeling of those, just in that I felt it produced a unique, enjoyable experience. But that was like maybe 15% of the fights in this game, to be fair.
Yeah, like I kind of see, I know what you're talking about, and I kind of agree. My problem is that because I've been playing actual tabletop so much recently, I know that feeling you're talking about, but I
Mm,
feel like it's 10 times as like cool in tabletop, because
mm,
there is no quick loading, so there is no like reloading at all, no checkpointing. Your character dies, they die, so every fight feels super important. Spells like can be used in all sorts of obscure ways that are
mm.
only limited by the player's imagination, compared to a video game where spells do very specific things. Like we had a spell called Stone Shape. Stone Shape lets you manipulate about 10-foot cubed of stone however you want. And in a video game, I don't think you can include that in the game because you can effectively level edit with that spell and like dig holes in dungeons that weren't supposed to be there. We did that stuff like that a lot. There's like all this dynamic stuff. Additionally, something I want to talk about is spell slots. I think I really like resting and spell slots in tabletop. I think it is a system that just basically doesn't function very well at all in a video game where you can rest whenever the fuck you want. Because I think in a good long dungeon, you get to pick and choose and ration out your spell usage and try to make the most use of them. You need to, like in modern editions of RPGs or specifically D&D, like in Baldur's Gate and D&D, saves are kind of like you save against spell, breath, petrification, wand, staff, rod, paralyzation. Those are your 5 kinds of saves. In the more recent editions, they split those into will, fortitude, and reflex. So reflex saves are for like not tripping over or getting webbed. Fortitude is like not getting poisoned or paralyzed, stuff that affects your body. My will is like
Mind
charms,
control.
illusion, mind control, that kind of thing. So good spell usage often involves understanding your opponent. Like, I'm fighting the big, heavy barbarian guy. He's probably got a shit will save, or, the big lumbering giant can probably be tripped easily, which I find makes spell usage and decision making a bit more interesting. Where here, I never really gave that any thought. I just cast web and it was good against everything. So I don't know, like I understand what you mean, and I did feel that a little bit in the final battle, but it's a bit primitive for me at this point. So like I think that's the primary reason I opted for face rolling things was because like I wasn't getting that satisfaction of creativity and problem solving that I have in tabletop. So I just kind of like did the most efficient thing, which I think probably negatively impacted my playthrough. Like it seems that you really got into it, which is cool. I kind of wish that I'd been able to.
One of the core things about this is we talked about in the early game how there's a sense of vulnerability. I don't
Yeah.
think that vulnerability ever goes away.
Mm.
I think that yes, you become invulnerable to lower level mobs, but if you're progressing along the main quest, stuff will kill you if you are not taking the appropriate steps. In addition to this, I just want to return to this idea of cheesiness a bit because I do agree with you about the resting system, like just not being very. I guess you basically just rest as much as you need to, and there's no penalty to it, and nothing stopping you from doing it. Right?
Yeah, sometimes enemies spawn around you, but like whatever,
There's
reload,
no downside. You
rest.
just kill them and press the rest button again until your party's healed and you've got full spells and everything. But to me, this once again just goes in that bucket of like the game is designed to be cheesed in a lot of ways, and there's all these different things that let you beat the game and beat scenarios, and it's just how much you want to do it. So with resting, it's the same thing, right? You go through the dungeon using your spells as much as you can to beat encounters, and then when you feel you can't or you need to access your high level spells, you rest. But
Mm.
is that any different from like using the overpowered wand or using the overpowered potion or hiding things in, or it's just another thing, right? It's just another thing, quick saving, quick loading. All of these are ways to modulate the difficulty of the encounter. And it's just which tools that you need to engage with that go beyond right clicking on the enemies. And you will dip into these tools as deep as you feel you need to, as far as your skill goes. So I enjoy dipping into that tool bag to iterate to overcome these challenges, I guess is how I would explain it. And I felt like there was a wide variety of ways in which I could do it, and I was satisfied generally when I overcame it in a way that was meaningful. The way I played as well, I'm assuming this is how the way most people play, is that I viewed a character dying as a fail state. So I would
Yeah, I
reload a
reload
save if
immediately.
any of my characters died. So I
Yeah,
had to get through the encounter without character death, which I think is how most people will play this game. It kind of reminds me of how most people would play Fire Emblem. You kind of view certain characters dying as a fail state, even though that's not the only way to play by any stretch.
yeah, I did the same thing. I pretty much reloaded on death and was like, I'm doing this wrong, or I kind of agree. I just felt that each of those options wasn't particularly rewarding, I guess, in terms of I overcame the encounter. It's like,
I guess what I would ask is, do you think that part of the problem is that these encounters weren't challenging enough, that they weren't, I guess, putting enough roadblocks in your way that you felt that you didn't feel like you were forced to innovate? Um, because what if in these fights, for example, so there's a mod for Baldur's Gate called SCS. And one of the things it does, or one of the options it does, is that when the fights start, the mages have already cast a lot of their defensive buffs. So when the fight starts, the mages are already mirror image. They're already got a globe of minor invulnerability. And part of the fight is figuring out how to disable those inside the fight. If you were pushed into a position where your strategy wasn't working and you felt like you were forced to use these things, do you think that you would have enjoyed these fights?
yeah, a little bit. I guess like the chance of spell failure is pretty high. A lot of times, like my dispel checks would fail, my commands would fail, and then I'd die, and then I'd reload, and I'd do the same thing, and it would work that time. Um, I don't feel like it's. I think it's the tightness of the balance, honestly, that just feels a bit wrong to me.
Hmm.
It's like very high variance, but oftentimes that variance doesn't lead into all these branching pathways. It's like there are all of these different things that can happen that ultimately lead to you pressing the reload button, rather than like, oh, this unexpected thing happened. I'm going to have to change my tactics on the fly. No, it's like this unexpected crit murdered your main character, so you just have to start again. And you're probably going to do the same tactic again, and this time that won't happen. Like, it just led to me never feeling like there was like those party v party battles where there's like a wizard and a thief and a warrior, and
Hmm.
you need to like pick their defenses apart and then kill them. Those were the most fun by far.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like the
Yeah.
fight on top of the trade guild, or the fight at the entrance of the Cloakwood Mines, or when you run into another mercenary group. Those were the highlights of the combat by far to me, and they wrecked me many times before I
The
overcame.
one that was the hardest for me was the last room of the catacombs. Had that enemy party that was right in the middle near the entrance.
The archer was wrecking my shit. Oh my
Yeah,
god. I
I
was like, what? How much? The archer's hitting you for like 30 damage per arrow.
actually crazy. Yeah, I basically had to lure them into this side room and pick them off one by one.
Hmm.
It was very tough.
Oh, okay. Well, it's interesting how different our experiences are. And I wonder if it's just because you understand these systems better than I do. So for me, it was more fun trying to overcome these challenges with different strategies. Whereas for you, you figured out a path that was a better path of least resistance than messing around with all this nonsense.
Well, I think it's more that like it's less novel to me, so I'm less excited to try things out. Like all of these spells are mostly familiar to me already.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I got, like half the spells on the spell list I've seen before in other systems because there's a lot of overlap, right? So also the cleric, druid, divine spell list, like level 2 spells, I feel like they're all useless other than like delay poison.
Which was
So
actually critical.
Yeah,
I
very
use that
important.
spell so much. I think because your main character gets a couple of casts of it, and I gave like Jahira 3, and
Yeah.
I was using all of them frequently.
Also, when you're only wizard, like half the time they cast a spell that kills your party because it was random. Uh, that also ended. I think that ended up discouraging me using it too much as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah,
Even though it was funny to begin with. So yeah.
so now that we've actually, do you want to have another music break, James? And then I have another thing I want to talk about.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been talking about combat a lot. There's a lot of it in this game. So should we do one of the combat tracks?
Let's do it. Which one are we doing?
It was your pick, wasn't it?
Damn it! I need to remember. Was it swords something?
It was sword against it was sword against darkness. So this
Nailed
was
it.
the one that Patrick picked and then promptly forgot about. I think all the combat tracks are generally pretty good. So here is sword against darkness. Alrighty, so that was combat. Unless you have something major to talk about in this section, I wanted to do a little bit of a detour and talk about loot for a bit and then character customization.
Yeah, could I just bring up one more point? It's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
related to what. Okay, so this is a combat related thing, and I wanted to get your thoughts on.
Hmm.
So in this game, fighters have no abilities.
Yeah.
Thieves have utility abilities, and mages have 8,000 spells, and
Yep.
clerics have, 500 spells with a lot more defensive options. How do you feel about this system where there's such a dramatic imbalance between, I guess, in complexity and options between these classes? Do you think that this works out in this game, or do you think it's fundamentally flawed and that fighters should have activated abilities and thieves should have activated abilities and rangers should have activated abilities like in more modern RPGs?
I think it's boring as shit. However, in a game with real time, with pause combat, if you give every character the same level of complexity as a wizard, like, it's just gonna be such a slog. Like, it's already difficult to micromanage with like one or two spellcasters, right? So
Mm.
having, all of these characters have so many options when it's not turn based is just overwhelming, in my opinion. But I tend to agree that, like, if I was playing AD&D and I was a fighter and all I did was hit thing, I would be bored out of my mind the whole time, right?
It's funny, isn't it? Because you've got mages who literally have infinite options, and then you've got fighters who hit. And I think what a lot of modern RPGs and probably D&D 5th edition have done is they've kind of equalized that a bit, where mages are probably still more complicated, but they're not. But the gap in complexity is probably a bit smaller, and that mages can do a bit less, but fighters can do a bit more.
You'd
I
be
agree with you.
surprised. Wizards and spellcasters in even like up to Pathfinder First Edition and even in Fifth Edition D&D are still quite a bit more complicated. Like, you played through Baldur's Gate 3, right? And in
Yes.
that game, fighters and high strength characters have, like, they can jump and they can throw and pick up people and they can push things, which gives them more options in combat. That is completely unique to Baldur's Gate 3. Normally, yeah, they just hit stuff, right?
Oh, Baldur's Gate 3, they've got like abilities as well, though, don't they? Like they can stun enemies. bit like that.
They have some stuff, yeah.
Yeah,
But they still have more
lacerate,
options.
whirlwind,
Y- Yeah, they still have more
cleave.
options in that game, I
Like
think.
a lot of them are like martial abilities, but they have abilities that they can use. It's not right clicking on the enemy, even though they do still do that sometimes.
Yeah, there's
Um,
there is stuff like there's combat abilities. It's still not like a video game, a pure video game RPG game where like you're playing World of Warcraft and your warrior has like 12 basically melee spells.
oh yeah, MMOs. Everyone's a caster basically.
Yeah,
Just you
it's
cast.
not like that. It's still
Yeah,
a bit, yeah, and it's still like the early game strongly favors fighters and the late game strongly favors wizards.
but for what it's worth, I agree with you that when you look at it in terms of overall complexity, it actually hits a good level. It's just to me it's baffling in some ways, just the gap here where and it seems to me like going into Baldur's Gate 2, and I don't know if this is how it actually works. You'd want to make every character a mage. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems to me like you want to multi-class everyone into a mage because the mage abilities are so strong, and
Hmm.
everyone can benefit from having 3 or 4 levels in mage to get access to like stone skin and all of these different. I don't see what the downside of it is. Like you get a few extra, you get some less attacks per round, but the upside you would get from having those levels in mage, which at a high level I feel like you'd acquire them super fast, would just be way way worth it. So I don't know if that's correct or not, but I could see myself just multi-classing everyone to be a bit of a mage.
Yeah, generally, like low level spells, like stop being effective at higher levels. Like sleep, for example, has a hit dice limit.
But
Like
what
you
about the
can,
defensive spells? Like,
buffs and stuff. Yeah, they're great. I mean, you can just buy. I mean, in tabletop, you just get scrolls and wands of the buffs, right?
other characters can't use scrolls though. Like, it's just
Uh in yeah, that's true in AD&D.
yeah,
In third edition onwards, they add skills. Like you know how the thief has skills like
yeah,
picklock and stuff.
yeah.
There's way more stuff like that. There's use magical device, which lets any character who invests in it use those items with
I
a dice
see.
roll. There's handle animal, athletics. There's like lots of stuff, and everyone can do it basically to different
Okay,
levels of
yeah,
success.
because one of the advantages of being a wizard at low level, yes, your spells aren't very good, but you're using the scrolls and wands, which are way too strong for being level 2 or whatever.
Yeah, so in our Pathfinder campaign, I am playing a rogue whose shtick is pretending to be a wizard. He walks around in wizard clothes, stuff like that. And at level 1, I dumped every single character option I could into use magical device, so he could use wands. And he had a 55% chance of activating a wand when he tried dumping everything. So it's still and wizards can do it without rolling to see.
Yeah.
And then by level 4 I had like 100% eventually. But yeah, early on it was rough. That gets like on later editions, other characters can access that stuff pretty easily.
Yeah, so it's weird, but like from a player perspective, because you're controlling a party of 6, it's okay that that fighters don't have many abilities, right? Because you're
Yeah.
controlling every single character. But I agree with you. Playing second edition D&D, where like if you're playing Baldur's Gate with friends and you're controlling one character each, and you have the fighter or the ranger, it sounds miserable.
Especially, yeah, I mean, like in tabletop, dialogue is much more interesting, and outer combat situations are much more interesting. So, like,
Yeah.
you can do other stuff. There's more than fighting in the game, but not in this. There is just fighting.
Okay, that's what I want to talk about. What you want to talk about? Loot and loot progression.
Yeah, so I have a big bone to pick with loot in this game. It
Mhm.
is so it's a low level adventure. So the items you find, the magic items, kind of cap out at like a +2 sword is crazy. And I found +2 sword for Khalid before like a third of the way through the game of Ascona. I think it's the one where there's that statue with the gems in its eyes, and that guy is making it. You get that really good sword,
Oh yeah,
and
you kill the guy who's attacking him, and you
yeah,
take the
yeah,
sword.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then I never found an upgrade for him again because there was nothing better for the rest two-thirds of the whole game. I've had that experience with a lot of the characters where I would get cool stuff from them early and then never upgrade those slots. Magic items, pretty boring. They'd be like, this thing gives you electricity resistance or something. And shops, I found like, I was really excited to get to Baldur's Gate finally and go through all the shops. I went through every shop in the city and none of them had an upgrade for me.
It,
Um,
on the topic of shops, it is funny. You have all of these shops which have nothing, and then you go to the Mage's Tower shop, and they have like 8,000 powerful magic items. Did you notice that? It's like
yeah,
this one shop has all of the amazing gear. It's got all of these cool arrows. It's got all of the scrolls, and then you go to three other shops, and it's just generic items, and that's it. I'm like, why didn't they spread these out a bit? Like, why not have like the fletching arrow shop or something? Why is everything dumped in this one shop? It doesn't make any sense to me.
yeah. So enemies drop like gems and stuff that you can sell in gold. And I was swimming in gold with nothing to spend it on, and there
Oh
was
yeah, me too. I bought everything. By the at the end of the
yeah,
game, I was like, I'm never going to afford this item, and then I just bought out the inventories and got every single magical item in the game.
yeah. All of this to say is that it didn't like I didn't notice this immediately when I started the game. It took me like till I was like halfway to cotton on to the fact that like 90% of the time I'm not going to find any items at all. So I was already starting to get a bit disengaged with exploration based on the sameness of it. Like I've already established I have no intrinsic motivation to explore. The act of exploring isn't very fun. At this point, I realized that the extrinsic motivation, rewards, items, stuff, isn't rewarding or exciting either. And I'm like, why do I want to explore again? And like the combat is face rolly, so this kind of led to my like playthrough. Like the first half, I was exploring every corner of the map. The second half of the playthrough, I did the absolute bare minimum to progress the main quest, and that was it. I think you were telling me you finished the game at level 8. I finished the game at level 6 because I was massively underleveled.
That is a hard end game fight at level
It was
6.
hard. Yeah, honestly, it made it more enjoyable because it was hard, I guess. But like, yeah, like I didn't want to explore. I didn't want to do quests. I didn't want to play the game at this point. To explain how bad this was for me, uh, what I would do when I was playing Baldur's Gate is I would play for like after the halfway point, I would play for like 20 minutes and then feel bored and exhausted. So I would take a break. And what I did in this last 4 weeks was I played through this DLC campaign in Wrath of the Righteous. So I took a break from playing a CRPG by playing a different CRPG because I was so bored out of my mind. Like, the characters have no dialogue, there's no cool loot. I just, I just wanted it to be over by the end. And I haven't even got to character customization yet, which was probably an even bigger nail in the coffin because
Before
there,
that, can I just let you know what I think about the loot?
yeah,
I When I first started playing, I was very high on the loot because it actually gives you a steady stream of loot at a
yeah,
pretty rapid pace.
yeah,
And because you have six characters and because you're kitting up six different characters, it
yeah,
feels like you're finding a lot of relevant stuff for each of those characters. It's like, oh, this is an upgrade to armor for this character. It's a bit lighter, but it's just as effective. Oh, I found a ring that's good on clerics. And as you go through, I'd say the first probably up to the bandit camp even, or the bit
mm,
between Nashkel Mines and bandit camp. I really enjoyed the loot progression. I do agree with you, James. It
It
completely
caps
dries
out.
up in the
Yeah,
second half of the game. And I was like, I don't even know what it is that I'm finding anymore. And when every now and then I did find something, I was over the moon. I was ecstatic because most of what you're finding is +1 weapons that are magical items.
yeah,
Um, I had the advantage, I guess, over you, James, that occasionally I found some high level scrolls, which were
yeah,
quite cool, which you probably didn't get the same usage of, but I got found some level 4 and 5 spells. But generally, yeah, the loot goes down to nothing, and you can go through entire screens where you have end up having 0 loot rewards, which have improved any of your 6 characters, and it's incredibly frustrating when that happens. You expect to get something from that, but sometimes I was getting just absolutely nothing. So I agree with you, James. I was initially very high on this, but I think that it drips to nothing. And I think that if you don't do the exploration early, then there's not much reason to return to it later.
yeah. Also, like, video game loot can be kind of dull. Like, you don't always have to find, like, in tabletop, you don't have to find gear. You can find items that are powerful and useful and cool. So, my favorite magic item that we found in our campaign is called the Door Knocker. It is a doorknob. What you can do with that doorknob is you put it on a wall, and then that wall turns into a door, and you can open it. But as soon as you take the doorknob off, it turns back, and so you can't. So you can open a hole in any wall, walk through it, but you can't take the doorknob with you to the other side, which limits it a little bit. But it like lets you solve problems and break dungeon layouts so hard. It is the coolest thing ever. There is nothing like that in this game, right? There
That's a bit
was,
of an unfair standard, to be fair, James.
yeah,
Like, I don't know if the lack of a door knocker is a condemnation on.
yeah, but what I mean is all of the items, all they are is +1 to attack roll. Like they're all cold numerical upgrades, right?
Okay,
There's nothing.
how do you think it compares to the loot in Baldur's Gate 3 or one of the Pathfinder games? Because I think that's a fairer
That's a fair
comparison.
comparison.
Yeah.
Way worse still.
Yep.
So I mean, like one of the half of the problem is that, like in Pathfinder, it's a full level 20 campaign, so loot goes the scaling's insane, and you just constantly find new shit. Baldur's Gate 3, they did this cool thing where there were these like weird item sets that had these weird build around mechanics built into them. So like it would mean that like you wouldn't be able to use the piece of gear initially, but like it made you excited to go find the other pieces to see if you could make it work for your character. In Baldur's Gate 3, my inventory was filled with low level magic items that I sometimes equipped because they had weird edge case uses. There's nothing like that. Like in this game, when you find an upgrade, you throw the old piece away, you sell it because like there's not much unique loot. Like the most that there is that sword they give you that's good against doppelgangers, which has a lot of use later in the game. You can keep that, or the spider
Yes, the
sword.
bastard sword.
Yeah, those kinds of things were useful.
There were some items that had abilities attached to them. There was a
The
like
belt
Imoen
the
had.
belt of gender change.
Imoen
That was
had.
the funniest one. Like,
I gave Imoen my ring of invisibility so that I could backstab cheese.
mm,
Then there was a necklace which I think cast fireball. You've got all the wands. It sounds like you didn't use the wands as much as I did, but I used like all of them frequently, and they give you so many as loot, so you can just use wands a lot. You don't feel. At first, I was a bit you know cagey about using them because they were so powerful. But then I was just spamming them after a while, and they're all really strong, and you can win most fights by one spamming. Uh, so I still found stuff that was relevant, mainly wands and scrolls,
wands and
but
scrolls were the most exciting, and good potions were good too.
even then, I'm going to be honest, I barely use potions. I acknowledge that they're powerful and they're a thing that you can dip into, but at least for me, I didn't feel compelled to dip into potions. When I did, it was mostly like the magic resistance one that I got the most use out of.
Oh yeah, that one was really good. Yeah, inventory management we should touch on too, because it's a bit of a pain if you don't go out of your way to get the extended edition exclusive bags that hold things.
I wanted to ask you about this actually, because you and I love survival horror games. We didn't, I mean, I wasn't before I started the show, but now I'm very firmly a survival horror
Yeah.
game fan. And one of the things that those games do is they severely limit your inventory. Can you explain to me why having limited inventory in this game is a problem to you, whereas in a survival horror game, it's a feature and it's part of what makes the game work? Why is it different here, and why is having a limited inventory a bad thing?
The way I feel about it is that in something like Resident Evil, there is significant opportunity cost to what you bring with you, and it is a very meaningful gameplay decision of what to leave at home and what to bring with you. In this game, my bags are, I have so much inventory space that my bags are always overflowing with potions and scrolls, to the point where, like, no matter what situation encounter, I probably have enough space to have an answer for everything anyway. So at this point, like, it becomes more tedious than anything because I'm trying to vacuum up all the loot and it doesn't want to go. There's not enough space. It's in this awful middle ground of it's too big for opportunity cost to be relevant, but it's too small to be able to ignore it. So you have to tediously rearrange stuff all the time. It's also annoying because in later tabletop games, like I said, when they have more skills, identifying magic items is just a skill check that you can do at any time, whereas here you have to burn a spell or a scroll always. So I always wanted to have lots of scrolls on my wizard, but my wizard was also the person that had to identify things. So there were so many scrolls that all the scrolls couldn't fit in Nira's bags. So every time I found a magic item, I had to open up the inventory, move a bunch of scrolls into another inventory, then move the magic item to Nira, then identify the item, then move the item to the character that can use it, then move the scrolls back into the inventory.
And that's not even getting into weight limits, is it?
No. And then there's like things like you have to carry. Yeah, I don't know. It's just tedious. I want my inventory management to either matter or not matter at all. It's this middle ground where it kind of matters, but not really, which is a bit unpleasant to me.
I think you nailed it, James, because the game gives you between your 6 characters 120 inventory slots or whatever it is. I don't know if it's 10 by 2. It's probably about 10 by 2. So it's like 120, or maybe it's 8 by 2 and it's 84 or whatever it is. But that is more, you're right. That's more than enough inventory slots to give you literally everything you need. It's just that so much of it gets chewed up by
junk
loot.
items. Yeah.
Junk. So necklaces and gems and scrolls of lower value, things that you can sell. But you're heavily encouraged in the early game to just sell everything to get money.
Yeah.
So you feel compelled to jam every single one of your character's inventory full of loot. But then not every kind of shop will accept you to sell every kind of loot.
Also, in Resident Evil, like, enemies sort of come back. So, like, one thing, like, if my inventory is full, I will go to town, sell, come back, loot the rest, then leave. There's a real cost to doing that in Resident Evil because there's enemies there that could eat your resources that come back. Here, it's just time consuming.
Yeah, it got to the point where I would just not pick up jewelry anymore because I was like, I can't be bothered. Like, the gold I get from this is not worth the effort to manage my inventory.
Did you get Nira's bag?
The gem bag?
Yeah.
No, I never did. Because by the time I realized that was a thing, I was like, I can't even be bothered picking up gems anymore. Like I was at that point where I was like at the very end of the game, and I was like,
Yeah, okay.
I have enough gold. I don't need gems, so I'm not going to bother getting gems.
Yeah, because I
So,
had the gem bag from the beginning and was like, I would have gone crazy without that thing.
but the scroll case and the potion
Potion
case that you told
case.
me about, I was very grateful to get those and actually be able to have all the spells in my bag. Because stuff like reveal invisibility scrolls were
Mm.
really useful for my wizard because a lot of the enemy wizards will just cast invisibility the moment you see them and you're like shit. So yeah, I guess in the end maybe I found this annoying, but when I was able to identify and be okay with leaving loot on the ground, it was okay. So I was picking up high level scrolls. I wouldn't even bother picking up low level scrolls. I picked up any magical item because I knew they would sell for decent gold once I identified them. And I left everything on the ground and I was okay with that. It was more annoying for me in the early game where I was trying to pick up all the gems and everything. But by the time I got to mid game, I was just ignoring them a lot of the time, unless I knew that I would be jaunting back to the shop shortly. Like when I was in Baldur's Gate and gone to encounters, I would pick them up because I knew there was a shop right there. But when I was doing Cloakwood Mines and I was miles away from anything, I basically picked up, 5 to 10 gems. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm just going to leave the rest and I don't care.
I,
And so it ended up not hurting too much. You do have enough inventory slots spread amongst your characters that it, you're not struggling unless you're trying to pick up everything. So
Now
just
that I
don't pick up
think
everything.
about it, I think the Cloakwood area is the exact point in the game where I became disengaged because I remember I was having fun at the bandit camp before,
Hmm.
and then the Cloakwood was long and tedious, and then the mines was yet another mines.
It's so they can reuse the assets, James. I mean, in the game's defense, that is the core thing about the story. So it's not crazy that you'd be expected to go into two mines. It's just that they could have done, and I
They could
think
have
that the
written the
second,
story differently for variety's
I,
sake, right?
I think that the second mines is a more interesting layout because you kind
Yeah.
of have the barracks underneath and everything, and the final boss is kind of interesting. I don't think having a second mine is a problem. I just think that they needed to make the mine layouts more interesting. But having to go into two mines when, yeah, I don't think that's intrinsically a bad thing. It makes sense.
Yeah, like again, I agree. I thought it was cool that the narrative was so grounded in a way. Character customization, or rather the lack thereof.
Yes.
I was so disappointed in this. This is my number one favorite thing about RPGs is character customization. Building a character, like whatever character I want to build, and figuring out some cool niche thing that is different to what everyone else is doing is like the fun. That's the crack for me, right? That's the thing that keeps me coming back to these sorts of games time after time is having some weird idea and trying to see if I can figure out how to do it. Leveling up in this game is so boring. There is like one of the things I criticized BG3 for when we played through it the most was that you make a decision like every 3 levels, which is your feat selection. This game's even worse, where 4 out of 6 characters don't make decisions, and then the 2 characters that do make decisions are my 2 thieves who put points into their thieving skills, which was Imoen puts points into find traps, and my character puts points into pick locks, and that was it, right? I was so excited to get to level 2. And I guess getting to spell levels to get new tiers of spells is cool, but you don't even like. I guess because I had 3 divine casters, I didn't make spell decisions either. I just got all the spells. So
But you do get to choose which spells to use, right? Uh, Even as a divine caster, you might when you hit level 3 spell casting, you now have like 12 spells to select from, and you can only have 2 of those 12.
yeah, but if you need one of the others, you just press the rest button and change them. So
Okay. So basically, I do agree with you, and I think this goes back to what we said before about which classes were more complex. As a spellcaster, you do get a lot of options. Like as a sorcerer, I got to pick my spells, and that gave my character their flavor and their options. But for every other class, you're kind of moving along a linear track, and unless you dual class into something that casts spells, you're not getting any options. Once again, the complexity is almost entirely concentrated in terms of being a spellcaster and choosing
Hmm.
what spells you have at your disposal. Um,
I'm not even like, it's not even purely mechanical, like trying to make a broken build or something like that. Just from a role play point of view, you can't make a
mm,
character with a unique identity very easily here.
yes,
Um,
you're absolutely right. So, like, if you're playing, even like if we compare it to a contemporary RPG like Fallout, Fallout has you picking
yeah,
granular stats in, say, speechcraft, science, and energy weapons. Now your character is specializing in those three things and as good as those three things. And that's not a crazy complicated system, but it's a lot more complex and interesting from a role playing and uniqueness point of view
yeah,
than Baldur's Gate, where your character class defines your progression and your character class can only really be one thing in a lot of instances. So I do agree with you. I think that the best way to get choices from your character progression here is to roll a lot of casters. And you can roll casters of different schools and have those casters of different schools have different kinds of spells. And then you can kind of have different builds. But outside of these casters, you're completely right, James. There is a lot less choice here than in pretty much any other RPG I've encountered in my life.
yeah. So, like, I struggle to. It's really difficult for me to like identify. Once I got through the halfway and I understood the game and there wasn't much more to discover, it was really hard for me to say, like, to motivate myself to even play the game at times. I found myself procrastinating a lot because what am I looking forward to? Like, quests with like two lines of dialogue, no loot, uh, dungeon layouts that are uninspired, samey areas. There's no big dopamine hit when you level up and get to look at all the options. Like, what am I playing this game for? Like, I didn't really have an answer to that, and I like not super invested in the main plot. Like, it's cool enough, but without the characters to back it up, give you a bit of, yeah, like it's like I like listening to the music. It's like that was what I came up with. I don't know.
I think the thing that was driving me forward more than anything else was these good combat encounters
Hmm.
because some of them gave me like it was like a 40-minute wall that I had to overcome. And it sounds like you got through this game a lot easier than I did.
I don't think so.
But
There was a
oh
lot of
yeah.
reloading.
But those 40-minute walls for me were the reason to play the game. Like it was those where everything kind of came together and I got to experiment and play with the systems. That's where I had the most fun. And I think that I found a lot of the stuff around the trimmings, such as the looting and the character progression, less offensive or less fundamentally boring than you do, although I do acknowledge the criticisms you're making. Like I was able to craft, I guess, enough variety between my casters that I felt like I was still building characters, although I completely agree with you about the fighters and thieves, which are kind of dull. Holistically, even though the individual characters were less interesting as a party, it felt like there was just enough there to keep me invested and interested in the progression of my party. Um, yeah, one of the reasons, James, that I didn't want to play Baldur's Gate 2 before Baldur's Gate 1 is that I don't like starting with a high level party because the game's complicated and
hmm.
me wrapping my head around a level 8 caster from the get go would have
It's
been
too
too much
hard.
for me. Like,
Yeah.
what I needed was this is what I needed. I needed something where I could, like, gradually learn the systems as I played and learn these different spells and play around with them to kind of get an understanding of how the game functioned. And that's what Baldur's Gate 1, as I've played it over the past month or so, has given me an understanding. But I can understand how you, with all of your experience with these systems, both in tabletop and the modern 3.75, versions of Pathfinder and everything, you could find a lot of these things which interest me far less interesting, and how you could be craving something more, I guess, intellectually stimulating, both in terms of systems and
But just more,
decision
yeah,
making,
just more complex, I guess, or more rewarding.
less random.
I don't. The randomness can be okay. It just has to be. One thing I do notice now is that the dice rolls in this game are so cold. Like they just happen. Like in tabletop, when there's this like life or death situation, there is so much drama and gravitas behind one dice roll where everyone around the table is holding their breath as this person rolls the dice to see if their character lives or dies. That doesn't exist in this, right? Like you just reload, and the rolls happen like they're nothing. It kind of feels a bit hollow to me, I guess.
The other thing which what playing this game has done is that it's gotten me interested in the idea of Baldur's Gate 2, because I've seen these little
Yeah,
snippets of what the spell system can offer, and it's got me, I'll look at a list of level 6 spells or whatever, and I'm like, holy shit, this seems crazy. I wonder what it would be like to have a mage with level 6 spells facing off against other enemy mages that have these spells.
I think it'd
What
be
would those
cool.
combats be like?
Yeah.
So
See,
it kind of has inspired me. Like, even though those systems aren't here, I've kind of gotten little glimpses of what could be. So I don't know. There's something about this game that has spoken to me on a level I wasn't expecting, I guess.
I think like the thing you're tapping into, that like high level wizard battles are cool, is one
Yes.
that I agree with wholeheartedly, right? Um,
Yeah.
can I give you an example of something that happens in high level like D&D or Pathfinder?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
there's a level 5 spell called Teleport. This spell instantly transports you to a designated destination, which may be as distant as 100 miles per caster level. So you can teleport between countries at like level 10, right?
Yeah.
And then divination wizards can scry on things like that far away. So you can like get a piece of hair and you can like scry a dude in another country and then prepare all your fighters and then just like telefrag into that room. And because that's a thing, like wizards have to ward against scrying and like take all these countermeasures. So like the absolute insanity of all of the layers of protection and countermeasure gets so crazy later on. So I want to say that I agree with you. It's super cool, and I actually am interested in Baldur's Gate 2 for that reason. Like, it's obviously not going to be as crazy as this in tabletop, but like, I know my friends tell me that the reason they like those games is because of the wizard battles. So, I'm pretty sure if we do Baldur's Gate 2, I'm re-rolling wizard or sorcerer.
But you can do that. You can just create a new character. You don't have to import. Yeah. James, do you want to move on to final impressions? It sounds like we've kind of covered most things, unless there's something else you want to touch on.
No, that's pretty much my notes like summed up at this point. I'll go first, I guess, because I've already been pretty straightforward with my opinion.
Hmm.
I ultimately did not enjoy Baldur's Gate 1. I did in the beginning very much. I actually was very enthusiastic in the first 8 hours or so of play. I was messaging Patrick about stuff a lot in those first few days. And then at some point, the loot runs dry, the character upgrading is obviously non interesting. The level design doesn't really pick up, and I was really struggling to find motivation to play the game at all. I could not recommend this game in good conscience. I think it holds up, like from a technical standpoint. The music's great. The extended edition looks nice still. Like the environments look nice enough. That I enjoyed the atmosphere and the music and the character like voice lines. That was fun. But the actual like engaging with quests and explorations just like not super interesting to me. So like ultimately like I can't really recommend playing this over any modern take on this kind of game. I could totally understand people who had played this when they were younger liking the game, but for me it's just not complex enough, I guess. So I'm gonna have to give this one a pass, unfortunately.
This game has been very interesting for me to play because I've got a little bit of knowledge of D&D. I played this game a little bit, and I don't even necessarily disagree with a lot of the critiques that James has brought to this game today. I think it is a messy, scrappy, ugly game in a lot of ways. I think that it's wildly imbalanced. Spells like sleep at level 1 just stun large groups of enemies and you can just click them to death. Enemies can insta kill you out of nowhere frequently. The game is not balanced around resting, around quick saving, quick loading. There's so many ways to cheese, and it's hard to tell what is cheese and what is intended strategy. But at the core of it, when this game is good, I think it's great. I think that the messiness and the scrappiness and the imbalance allows an exploration of mechanics in a way that I really enjoyed. I had a lot of fun messing around and playing around with the systems and the spells in particular in this game. I felt like there were lots of different strategies that weren't strategies where they're like build a lightning build or anything. It was more just like trying out different combinations of wands and AoE effects and seeing what happens. And things would happen in different dynamic ways. And those battles that you have against enemy parties are some of the most fun battles I've had in RPGs ever because of the way that things unfolded in those messy ways and me scrambling to come to grips with the encounter. It's weird because I do think that you can look at this game and say that it's not worth your time. But for me, it offered something unique and interesting. And because of that, I recommend it. But it's a recommendation with a lot of caveats. And I wouldn't blame someone from turning away from this game. This is not a game that everyone's going to like. It might not be a game that even most people like, but it did offer something unique to me. And for that, I deeply appreciate the time spent with it. I also think for me that in order to understand Baldur's Gate 2 and I guess more complex systems, this was a nice ramp up to it. So, specifically as a person who didn't feel as comfortable with all these systems, it was a nice, like, easy environment for me to explore and understand these things. So, maybe for people who are newer to it, this might also be a decent entry point.
Yeah, and I think that's where I think ultimately, like, if we were to try and step back and do a non-biased opinion, I feel that the real answer is like if you haven't really played many RPGs before, this is actually a pretty good entry point because even though under the hood it's quite complex, that complexity, like Pat said a few times, doesn't impact your decision making too much. So you don't get punished too much by not knowing the ins and outs of the system. So like from that point of view, yeah, I think it's a pretty good entry level title that holds up technically.
It's weird to say that though, because at the same token, it is like a hard game.
Yeah.
Or it's a hard game in the sense that you will die a lot. Like the fact that you can quick save and quick load at will reduces the difficulty as long as you're happy to include that in your understanding of the game. But in terms of like your vulnerability, you die shitloads in this game, and I think every new player is going to die shitloads. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
Like you can't get around that. You will run into stuff like I ran into a vampire wolf early on. This stupid wolf soloed my whole party. Why? Because they're invulnerable to the low level weapons and it heals itself when it attacks you. And I was like, what is even happening? I just explored one thing outside the town. The sleep spell didn't work on it. I don't know how I'm meant to get around it. That kind of stuff happens all the time in the game. Um, but so you have to be okay with that. And a lot of newer players who have never played an RPG before will probably think that's bullshit because it is. So not only do you need to be a new player, you kind of have to be open to the, I guess the wild imbalance of this game, which is maybe a smaller subset of people than I think.
I don't know. Maybe often feel like people that want very tight balance are in the minority sometimes. Like I know we appreciate that a lot, but like in the broader gaming community, I think it's not as valued as you'd think. Like lots of people don't necessarily care for the game part of the game as much as the experience part of the game. And for those people, I think balance is less of a concern than like having cool spells like web, right? Like,
Well, yeah, but I guess it's not a power fantasy in the way that,
yeah, like Wrath is or something. Yeah.
or Infamous or, Skyrim. Like, this if you're not prepared, shit will murder you very quickly. So that has to be something you're okay with, I guess. Which I like. Like I like that aspect of the game. Vulnerability, I think, is always good, particularly because the enemies in a lot of instances are as equally vulnerable if you can exploit them. Anyway, my thoughts on this game are a bit messy, but it might be appropriate because I think it's a bit of a messy game. It's a lot of these things stuck together, which yeah, but overall, I liked it. I liked this game. It would definitely not be on my top 10 or anything, even remotely, but I liked the experience I had with this game, and it's made me want to play more CRPGs, which is probably the key thing here. Icewind Dale in particular intrigues me.
I have a recommendation for you. I was going to mention after the show, but now's as good as any.
Yeah.
When I said I took a break to play a DLC for Wrath, so I think you might really like that because it's a survival horror game. You basically have very vulnerable, worthless characters who wake up they're brand new characters, not connected to the main story at all. It's called Through the Ashes, and you basically wake up in a theater, and there are no weapons, so you pick up wooden props and you defend yourself against like the shit that's going on in the city at large. Uh, Incredible. The resources are tight. Like I was hours into the game, and finding a regular metal weapon was the most insane thing ever. Because it's like all the
That's so
wooden
cool.
weapons have like -2 to hit, and you barely find potions and stuff, and you get milestone XP, so you don't get XP for killing stuff. So oftentimes you can sneak past stuff and get
Or
XP.
run.
Yeah. It's still very reload heavy because dice rolls and vulnerability, but like I felt the like small condensed little areas that have that like looping Resident Evil level design, very tightly designed, very cool.
That is a cool genre mashup, actually.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll give that a
it's
try.
super awesome.
I think
Yeah.
I actually own that game as well. So.
Yeah, so may as well. But yeah, I'm very open to playing Baldur's Gate 2 in the future. Absolutely.
Yeah, when we have 80 hours, easy. This is fair 80
Easy.
hours.
Yeah, but hopefully be a bit more interesting. At
Well,
least
from what I've heard, Baldur's Gate 2 is like
massive startup hub, right?
they basically create the model for companion-based storylines, and I've heard that Act 2, where it opens up and you can kind of like do what you want, is many people's favorite RPG chunk in existence. So,
yeah,
obviously much more complicated combat. I think by the time Baldur's Gate 2 had come around, they had a better understanding of what made good combat and what made good dungeons as well. So they kind of, everyone says Baldur's Gate 2 is the best. So I'm assuming it's at least a big step up on Baldur's Gate 1.
Oh yeah, it must be, right?
Yeah.
Because I've played the start of that game, and honestly, like the intro seems more compelling than like half the 90% of the game in Baldur's
Well,
Gate
it basically
1.
starts off as a dungeon, right? Like it's like a
Yeah,
dungeon crawl. Yeah.
and the dungeon's layout is way more interesting than anything in BG1. So like I at least know that for a fact, right?
One day we'll make one of our listeners very happy. But so what are we doing next episode, James? Baldur's Gate 2?
Okay.
But wait, before we get into that, so I will say, I'll just reiterate who we are. James and I are the Retrospectives podcast. You can find all of our content on our website, which is rspodcast.net. This is our 128th episode, so we've got shitloads of episodes on games that are at least 15 years old, many of which are classic PC games, classic or cult classics that people are unfamiliar with. This is our first game, really, of this kind, I think. But we've covered some chunky
Fallout,
JRPG.
I guess.
Fallout, yeah. We covered Fallout 1 on our show, and we did Fallout 2 with Chris of the Retro Asylum podcast. So if you'd like some more CRPG content, you can check those out. Otherwise, we've covered a couple of JRPGs, Final Fantasy VII and Vagrant Story, and unfortunately Luna Silverstar Story, but we all try to forget that one.
Man, Luna was samey too, but I liked that game. I need to work out why.
No, don't. You could, but we've done games of all genres and types, from racing sims to visual novels. So if you like classic games and want to hear modern takes on it, please do check that out on our website, rspodcast.net. And if you really love the show, you can support us monetarily on our Buy Me a Coffee page. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. So without any further ado, James, I picked Baldur's Gate. What are we doing next episode? What are you making me suffer?
Oh boy. Okay. After this one, I was like, I just need to pick something that I really want to play. And I literally sat here on my computer the other night, sifting through games, and was like, nothing appeals to me. I want to do something we haven't really done before, but we've done everything, but like, we've done an RPG, we've done all these other genres recently. We need something completely unique. And then I found a game that made me laugh, because I don't think Patrick will want to play it, but I think it'll be really fun. At the very least, Patrick already owns it on his Steam library, apparently, which surprised the shit out of me. It's not a game that I thought he would have played, and it is Recettear, a item shop management sim / action RPG.
This game is meant to be really hard. I have played it a bit,
which I think appeals to me a lot. I played a similar game. It came out a few years ago, Potionomics, and that was super fun. Like, that game had good opportunity cost decisions and difficult decisions. I liked it. So yeah, at least you don't have to buy it, right? You already own it.
So we're playing a management sim with terrible ARPG bits on the side. This game, it sucks, James. I can already tell you I dislike it right now.
Excellent. Well, I hear people complaining about other games in the genre not being as good as it, so we'll see.
All right. I guess we will see, James. You're evil. I don't want to play it. Also, the stupid fucking art style. Fine. We'll play your stupid Recettear game, and I'll have to save us with another good game next episode.
That's okay.
Alrighty. Well, I guess we'll see you in a few weeks for Recettear and Items Shop's Tale. Thank you so much, James. Everyone have a good night. Thank you so much for listening to us tonight, and you have a good one.
See you later, guys.